Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Yancey Knoll. On the evening of August 31, 2012, Yancey Knoll left work early to head home. He got into his old Subaru station wagon and was about to merge onto Interstate 5 when he stopped at a traffic light. At that moment, a BMW pulled up next to him, driven by a young man. Suddenly, a shot was fired, followed by several more. Yancey was killed instantly, and the entire incident happened so quickly that he had no chance to react. Witnesses at the scene immediately called 911. This incident event sent shockwaves through Seattle, Washington. At present, the cause of the shooting is still unknown. Yancey's friends said that he had no enemies. He was a kind, polite person and never had conflicts with anyone. He clearly did not deserve such a fate. An outdoor enthusiast, he loved hiking and enjoyed wine, working as a beverage specialist. No one believed that he could be involved in any conflicts. He was known to be kind, even shy, and always careful in communication, including when interacting with passers-by. No one believed that he could argue with anyone, which would provide a motive for a murder. But what was the reason for the shooting? The police need to find out. The attack occurred at 7:00 p.m., while it was still light outside and traffic was heavy. The attacker attacked Yancey at very close range. The shooting was done with great precision, indicating that he was confident in his actions. Fortunately, no other road users were injured, indicating that Yancey was the sole target of the attack. Other drivers, who unknowingly witnessed the incident, only heard a series of rapid gunshots. Then the BMW abruptly moved into oncoming traffic at a red light. Meanwhile, the Subaru remained stationary, with its engine running. Two other drivers, realizing something was wrong, pursued the shooter, but he quickly escaped. Other drivers approached the Subaru and found the driver inside bleeding. Paramedics confirmed that the driver, Yancey Knoll, died from 4 head injuries, with 1 wound to the temple. He was killed instantly, leaving him no chance to survive. A 5th bullet missed its target and was later found in the apartment of a 92-year-old woman, Patricia Schulmeister. It had gone through her window, hit a chandelier, and shattered a picture of a cat on the wall. She was lucky to escape, otherwise she could have been a victim of the gunman. After discovering the bullet, she went outside where police were investigating the crime scene and handed the bullet to an officer. It was later identified as a 9mm round, likely from a Glock pistol. This evidence became crucial for investigators, as they had no other leads at that time. Witnesses did not see the attacker's face and did not remember the BMW's license plate number. Initially, it was thought that the murder was a targeted attack, suggesting someone wanted to harm Yancey. However, he seemed to have no enemies. Even his friends did not remember any conflicts. He had never been arrested for a crime, which was confirmed by acquaintances, relatives, and police databases. The investigation could have taken a long time due to the lack of evidence. The only clue the police had was a bullet found in Patricia's apartment. In addition, the driver of the BMW attacked Yancey through the passenger window. Broken glass from the car was still on the road. As a result, the only information investigators had was that a BMW had a broken passenger window. During witness interviews, more information about the car involved in the incident was gathered. One driver reported seeing a silver BMW run a red light. The car was a nice convertible and had left the scene with the top down. The witness also reported that the car had chrome wheels and that a middle-aged, dark-haired man was inside. Based on the witness's testimony, an illustrator drew a portrait of the suspect. Although this was a weak clue, it was still crucial in tracking down the attacker. The image was posted on the police website within weeks of the incident, helping to create a composite sketch. Additionally, video footage from street surveillance cameras was obtained, but the quality was very poor. The cameras were positioned far away, capturing the BMW, but the license plate was not readable. Unfortunately, detectives had no other leads. The description of the suspect was shared with all police departments, and the traffic police began stopping all similar BMWs in the city. After the brutal murder, the police checked hundreds of cars and questioned hundreds of drivers who looked like the dark-haired man driving the silver car. On September 14, an unidentified woman contacted the police and mentioned Thomas Dean Bowman, who lived 10 blocks from the scene of the attack. She suspected that he might be involved in the attack on Yancey. Detectives found a photo of Thomas Dean and found that he closely matched the sketch of the suspect. So investigators began to carefully monitor him. However, it seems he is not someone capable of becoming a cold-blooded killer. Thomas Dean is a 29-year-old man, educated and a talented engineer. Since he was 12 years old, he has been called a genius. He attended college, and by the age of 20, he had started his own business, pouring his heart into it. His company, Wake Industries, specialized in robotics and was thriving at the time of the events. Thomas Dean also enjoyed a happy personal life. In 2007, he met Jennifer Palm at an educational seminar. She was a successful dentist. Their relationship went through many challenges, but after a year, they decided to get married. Friends say they understand and support each other. Thomas Dean was described as intelligent, sociable, friendly. Those who knew him could not believe that he was capable of such cruelty. However, investigators continued to gather information about Thomas Dean. They discovered that he owned a silver BMW similar to the one being sought. However, it was unclear if he was still using it. To find out, they followed him, but he didn't drive the car during that time. One day, his garage door was lifted, revealing a silver convertible sports car inside. This evidence led to Thomas Dean's arrest on September 21, 2012. As he was getting ready for work, police handcuffed him and took him to the police station, where he waited 2 hours for questioning. During the wait, he had a snack and coffee, appearing calm, but quickly became upset that his work time was being wasted. Thomas Dean's wife was also taken into custody and interrogated in a nearby room. Throughout the process, she answered most of the questions with the phrase, "she not sure," neither confirming nor denying any information. It was easy to see that she was hiding something. The interrogation lasted over 4 hours. Meanwhile, detectives examined Thomas Dean's car and noticed that the passenger window had been recently replaced, raising further suspicions. When they opened the BMW's door, they discovered small glass shards in the doorway, indicating the window had been broken. Additionally, the garage had a strong smell of fresh paint, suggesting recent repair work, possibly because the silver wheels had been repainted black. In addition, the police had a search warrant for Thomas Dean and Jennifer's house. They were surprised to find the house so empty. Despite earning a good income, but he had very little furniture. Instead of a bed, there was just a large mattress on the floor. Jennifer was the primary breadwinner, making about $250,000 a year, while Thomas Dean earned much less. He was a genius, spending all his time creating new projects, but he struggled with entrepreneurship. Thomas Dean and Jennifer loved to travel and spend a lot of money on trips. On the kitchen table, detectives found several notes, many of which were love letters exchanged daily between Thomas Dean and Jennifer. However, there was one note that caught their attention. It congratulated someone on being the best gunslinger of the Wild West. What did this mean? Detectives discovered that Thomas Dean and Jennifer had a small arsenal of weapons at their home, but not the murder weapon, a 9mm Glock. He was held in custody for 4 months while awaiting trial. He was unable to post bail, which was set at an extraordinary $10 million, an amount even he considered excessive. Throughout this time, he remained calm and showed no signs of fear. He and his wife, Jennifer, frequently spoke on the phone, but their conversations were monitored by law enforcement. Their behavior was noted as quite strange and childish. They used many pet names and spoke in a way that was overly sweet, which some officers found difficult to tolerate. During these calls, the police were unable to obtain any significant information, and the evidence against Thomas Dinh was minimal and indirect. A key focus of the case was to establish a motive for the murder. The police thoroughly searched for any relevant information and looked into a connection between Thomas Dinh and Yancey. However, they did not find any contact information, phone calls, or acquaintances between the two. This shows that the two people do not know each other at all. Upon examining Thomas Dinh's computer, investigators discovered that he had a long-standing interest in committing the crime. He spent years researching on the internet how to commit an effective murder and how to avoid punishment. This passion led him to create a detailed database of bloody crimes in which every piece of information was carefully organized and analyzed. All of this data was stored on his hard drive. Furthermore, after the murder, Thomas Dinh joined the Yancey Memorial page on social media. Investigators found videos on his computer showing him driving his BMW sports car recklessly and at high speeds. In addition, he has received extensive training in firearms skills, becoming proficient with both hands. Among the video footage police collected was a tutorial on how to use a gun through a car window, exactly what happened in the Yancey case. Immediately after that, police conducted a search of Thomas Dinh's workplace and discovered a crucial clue. Disassembled parts of a 9mm pistol were found in paper towels in the trash can. However, some parts were missing, preventing the full assembly of the weapon and hindering a ballistic examination to determine if the gun was used in the murder. Despite this, the discovery heightened suspicions against Thomas Dinh. The prosecution concluded that he had a motive to kill for amusement, randomly shooting the first person he encountered on the road, then cleverly disappeared in his car. After the murder, Thomas Dinh returned home and reviewed materials on how to erase evidence from his car. He then replaced the glass and painted the rims of his vehicle. At this time, the police suspected that he had an accomplice, which was his wife, Jennifer. She displayed nervous behavior and avoided eye contact, leading police to believe she was concealing information. However, she did not ask for a lawyer and instead gave investigators her wallet, which contained several receipts. These documents helped the investigation progress significantly. They pinpointed the exact location where Thomas Dinh had replaced the car glass. Jennifer reported that they were robbed of car glass, which prompted them to visit a car service. Investigators suspect that she may have known about what had happened. Although she did not know about Thomas Dinh's plan initially, he kept her informed after the murder and asked for her assistance. The following day, he and Jennifer went directly to a car glass store in Portland. He told the seller that someone had attempted to steal his car and that the thief had smashed the window. They acted calmly in the store, a detail that investigators later uncovered. Police could not confirm Thomas Dinh's account of the burglary, as he did not report the incident to police at the time. 3 weeks later, he and Jennifer visited a tire store in North Seattle. There he introduced himself as Peter, while Jennifer remained as quiet as before. They needed new tires, as old rubber tracks were among the evidence found at the crime scene. Although the murder weapon was never found, police did discover a brand new set of tires in Thomas Dinh's shop. The authorities believed they had sufficient evidence to charge him with first-degree murder. On November 19, 2014, 2 years after Yancey was murdered, Thomas Dinh appeared in court. He was no longer the confident man he had been when the police arrested him. Now he looked like a shy and humble college student, seemingly aiming to win the jury's trust. His transformation was intended to convince people that he was innocent, contrasting starkly with the violent image of a killer. However, the truth was different. Thomas Dinh's mother was Vietnamese, and his father was an engineer at Boeing. They never missed a court hearing, always supporting and believing in their son's innocence. However, his wife, Jennifer, was absent from the trial. His parents said that he was very worried about his wife, so he asked her not to come to court to avoid judgmental looks. Despite this, she kept in touch with him every day, and they always had sweet conversations. She had complete faith in his innocence. The prosecutor argued that Thomas Din's motive in the murder was to seek entertainment, as he wanted to experience the thrill of committing the crime and was trying to evade punishment. They presented extensive video footage from his computer as evidence, including numerous recordings of murders in which he collected important information. However, the defense argued that the police had collected all this evidence recklessly. They emphasized that, in addition to these documents, Thomas Din's computer contained extensive information about his travels and technical developments. They stressed that there was no information that could be considered proof of his guilt, as there was no physical evidence, such as DNA or fingerprints. However, when Thomas Din testified, he admitted to the crime. He described it as a fit of rage during a traffic accident. Although it was a risky decision, but in his view, this could be considered a mitigating factor in the murder case. He said that on that day, he stopped Yancey on the highway. Afterwards, he heard many curses and threats from Yancey. A Subaru followed his BMW to a traffic light, where they stopped. At that point, Yancey threw a wine bottle at him, hitting him in the head and injuring him, all while hurling insults. This frightened he so much that he pulled out his 9mm handgun and attacked Yancey in self-defense. Although there were many signs that he had overstepped his defense, he believed that this helped save his life. He believed that in a fit of rage, Yancey could have attacked him and caused a traffic accident. He also thought Yancey had a weapon in his car, which prompted his immediate response. However, many found his story hard to believe. Witnesses said that they did not hear any loud screams and did not see Yancey throw the bottle. The confrontation seemed to happen suddenly without any prior provocation. Furthermore, Thomas Din did not have any injuries on his head. Yancey's friends and family attempted to prove that his testimony was false. They insisted that Yancey would not behave like that and was unlikely to become aggressive, especially since Yancey would not give up his favorite wine. Despite this, Thomas Din maintained that his actions were a self-defense response to Yancey's aggression. He hopes to be acquitted on grounds of self-defense. However, he said he fled the scene of the crime in a state of panic. He wasn't thinking clearly and quickly disposed of evidence out of fear, all while denying that the materials found on his computer were related to the crime. Strange behavior, though. He remained calm throughout the 3-day trial. The prosecution aimed to prove Thomas Din's guilt through circumstantial evidence. Witnesses testified to the incident surrounding the shooting, after which the jury deliberated on the verdict. On December 9, 2014, they unanimously found Thomas Din Bowman guilty of murder. He was so shocked by the verdict that he couldn't believe it, breaking down in tears in the courtroom as the verdict was read. Thomas Din's parents defended their son. They accepted responsibility and repeatedly apologized to the Yancey family. They begged to go to jail on behalf of their talented son, who they believed could make positive contributions to society. However, their request was denied. In contrast, Thomas Din himself showed no remorse. He expressed indignation that the jury did not believe his claim of self-defense. Ultimately, he was sentenced to 29 years in prison. Meanwhile, his wife, Jennifer, filed for divorce, changed her name, and relocated to another city. She refused to communicate with the media and was not charged with complicity for cooperating with the investigation. After the verdict, Thomas Din attempted to end his life, but was unsuccessful. He is currently incarcerated at the Bay Correctional Facility in Washington. His home is currently vacant, and 2 vehicles linked to the case are stored in a police warehouse. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Orsolya Gal. Orsolya Gal had lived in Forest Hills for over 10 years. She is originally from Hungary and met her future husband, Howard, at a Christmas party in Budapest in 1994. At that time, she was 20 years old, and had just graduated from business school, while Howard was about to complete his master's degree. They exchanged love letters for several weeks, then taking a vacation together in Thailand. After returning to New York to continue his studies, he invited she to visit him, and they have been together ever since. He founded a consulting firm and was very successful. Meanwhile, she worked in Manhattan for many years, eventually putting her career on hold to have and raise her two sons, Jamie and Leo. On August 2, 2012, the family moved into a 5-bedroom home. They lived happily together, and friends described Orsolya as outgoing and friendly. People say she is always smiling, loves to joke, and is willing to chat about any topic. She loved to travel, and her Facebook profile showcased photos from family trips to Paris, China, and Tokyo. However, her greatest happiness is her sons, whom she cared for deeply and was very attentive. On the morning of April 16, 2022, Glenn Van Nostrand was walking his dog around 8:00 a.m. At this time, he saw a large cloth bag lying among a pile of trash near the sidewalk, on the grass near the corner of Venu Subway and Jackie Robinson Avenue. While he often encountered litter on that busy road, something about this bag felt off. As he approached, his dog became agitated and tense. Only when he stood near the bag he noticed the reason. Blood was seeping out and running down the concrete sidewalk. Initially, Glenn suspected the bag contained an animal carcass. He nudged it with his foot and found it surprisingly heavy. Curious, he bent down to unzip the bag. Then he saw a pair of pale bare legs inside. He tried to make sense of what he was seeing. At first, he thought they were the legs of a mannequin, because the skin looked stiff and unnatural. However, when he unzipped the bag further, he realized that the legs were covered by black jeans, a belt, and part of a woman's waist. Glenn found the woman curled up in a fetal position, her head bowed. He called 911 at 8:02 a.m., deeply disturbed by his discovery. He believed the victim might have been a teenage girl, based on her physique. Immediately after that, the police arrived. They quickly blocked the area around the crime scene. At this time, Glenn decided to use his dog to search the nearby area. While crossing the subway avenue, he noticed a trail of blood and alerted the police. This bloody trail, which extended for half a mile from the location of the bag, ultimately led the investigators to a $2 million house on Juno Street. A team of police stormed that house. During a quick search, they discovered blood on the first floor and in the basement, as well as a bloody knife on the third floor. In a bedroom, they found Leo Klein lying in bed. He said he lived in the house with his parents, Orsolya and Howard. He also said that his brother Jamie was away. After questioning, the police determined that Leo knew nothing about the situation, so they released him into the care of a relative. Meanwhile, the police identified the body found in a bag. It was Orsolya, Leo's mother, who was 51 years old. A forensic examination revealed that she had her throat cut and suffered 58 stab wounds to her torso, neck, and arms. There were also injuries on her palms and fingers, indicating a struggle. Forensic expert Miles said that the crime was very brutal, and the fact that the body was carelessly disposed of showed that this was an act driven by emotion. The extreme violence of the attack indicated that the murderer was likely someone known to Orsolya, rather than a stranger. This led investigators to suspect that the perpetrator could be the husband, a child, or even a lover. The youngest son, Leo, has been eliminated as a suspect. Jamie, the eldest son, and Howard, the husband, were both out of town on the day of Orsolya's death, but they were still being questioned. The identity of the mystery man who dumped the bag remains unknown. The investigation has caused anxiety in Forest Hills following Orsolya's sad death. Neighbors were deeply moved by the tragedy. Those familiar with Orsolya and her family brought flowers and offered their condolences. The shocking death has raised more questions than answers, leaving the motive for the crime a mystery, as police continue to hunt for the suspect. When the police informed the media that Howard and Jamie were important people, the public's attention quickly turned to Jamie. On the morning of Friday, April 15, Orsolya was reportedly looking at potential colleges for Jamie. Howard tweeted that he arrived in Portland at 1:36 a.m. on April 16. He later posted another status, which has since been deleted, announcing that he would be returning home to New York soon. The change appears to have come after Howard received a heartbreaking text message from Orsolya earlier that morning. The message said, "He's back. Don't call the police, or he'll kill the Howard family." Shortly thereafter, Howard was contacted by police and informed that the body of his wife, Orsolya, had been found. He worried about his family's safety and faced scrutiny from reporters and social analysts. They said that his Twitter posts seemed like a way to create an alibi. The message from Orsolya's phone seems like a fictional threat from a movie, making one wonder why a killer would waste time sending such a message after committing the crime. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry into the house. It appears that Orsolya knew the killer, or that he used a spare key to enter the house. Police are examining phone calls, surveillance camera videos, and receipts from places Orsolya visited to reconstruct her journey before her death. On Friday, April 16, 2022, she planned to go to Manhattan that evening to see an opera at Lincoln Center with friends. However, when checking her phone, the truth was completely different. On the night of her murder, she had been in contact with 3 different men. One of them will accompany her to Lincoln Center. All 3 men are currently under investigation. That night, Orsolya returned home alone by train and stopped by a bar at Forest Hills train station. This is where she often comes to have a drink or a snack after going out. She spoke with the manager, whom she knew well. Police believe Orsolya entered her home at 2:40 a.m., around the same time her attacker gained entry. At 4:30 a.m., he carried her body out using her son's hockey bag. A note found on the refrigerator read, "Find a new handyman." On the night of the murder, Orsolya had spoken with 3 men, one of whom was David Bonola, a 40-year-old handyman who had been working in their home for the past 2 years. He specialized in heating and ventilation. He is married with 2 children. However, 21 years ago he illegally immigrated to the United States from Mexico. By the time of Orsolya's death, he had become estranged from his family and was living in an apartment in nearby Richmond Hill. Neighbors described he as a night owl who often played guitar or rode his bike after dark, frequently stopping at a local cafe for food. The police discovered that David had a close relationship with Orsolya, as they often communicated over the phone. He frequently left comments and heart emojis on her Facebook photos, often calling her the most beautiful woman. According to the owner of a store across the street from his apartment, he would come in every evening to buy a red rose and even showed the owner a photo of Orsolya, expressing his love for her. The police were aware that she had been in contact with he in early April 2022, just weeks before her murder. The authorities then decided to secretly follow him to look for new clues. 21-year-old Olivia Kolinsky had been a barista at a cafe for 3 years, where David was a frequent visitor. Olivia described him as strange and somewhat creepy, noting that he often stalked people. He frequented the cafe multiple times a week, watching the waitresses and baristas closely, making comments about their looks. He also left affectionate notes in the tip jar. He even proposed to 2 of the employees. The cafe staff called the police several times, but he always managed to leave before they arrived. David's passion for YouTube clearly shows his thoughts and desires, mainly revolving around 2 themes: seduction and violence. He has created a YouTube playlist with many videos related to local crime. The playlist also includes many videos about intimacy and women, offering tips on attraction and seduction. One playlist has over 200 videos, all aimed at helping viewers develop their ability to attract women. It is worth noting that he is a man with a rich imagination and a penchant for violence. Then, surveillance cameras captured images of David walking near his apartment with a homemade white bandage on his left arm. That day, he visited a city doctor for treatment of cuts on his hands. However, he was referred to the hospital because the cuts were too deep. The police postponed cleaning up the trash at the crime scene for several days to conduct a special search, because they believe this pile of trash may contain evidence that help convict him. Among the discarded objects in the trash pile, they found blood-soaked brown boots, believed to belong to David, which were worn when he stabbed Orsolya nearly 60 times, along with a bloody t-shirt and bloody bandages. On Wednesday, April 19, 2024, detectives returned to the area to locate David, who had noticed he was being followed. David approached a patrol car and said he heard they were looking for him. The police then took him to the station, and there he admitted his involvement in Orsolya's murder. After a brief pause to eat a croissant, he repeated his confession for the video recording. During the prosecution, David explained that he and Orsolya had an on-again, off-again relationship for 2 years. Recently, she had ended their relationship again. On the morning of April 16, he went to her house to try to reconcile. However, their argument became so violent and loud that they had to go down to the basement to avoid waking her son, Leo. The argument became more heated, making David very angry. In a fit of anger, he grabbed a knife and cut her throat, stabbing her multiple times. To prevent Leo from discovering the body, he placed it in the boy's hockey bag and discarded it in a nearby forest park. David admitted that he sent a threatening message to her husband, Howard, in which he stated he would kill the rest of the family. However, his testimony contained several inconsistencies, particularly regarding his possession of a knife from Orsolya's kitchen during the fight in the basement. The next day, he changed his confession. He explained that he had gone to her house after learning that she had given him HIV and a sexually transmitted disease she had contracted from other men. He claimed that he knew she had received a call from another man and was planning to meet that man, which he could not accept. He also reported that during the altercation, she took a knife and forced him to leave the house, threatening to kill him. At that moment, he seized the knife from her and harmed her. On April 20, David Bonola was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, first-degree criminal trespass, and fourth-degree criminal possession of a weapon. Despite confessing to the crime twice, he pleaded not guilty. If found guilty, he could face a sentence ranging from 25 years to life in prison. District Attorney Melinda Catt announced that a serious crime had occurred, leaving 2 teenagers, Leo and Jamie, without their mother. This incident has also created fear in the community. David Bonola was sentenced to 25 years in prison in November 2022 after pleading guilty to manslaughter in the killing of Orsolya Gal in Queens, New York. After his prison term, he will be required to serve 5 years of probation. Many believe Orsolya shares some responsibility for her tragic death, stemming from her infidelity. At the memorial service, Jamie, the eldest son of she, spoke for himself and his younger brother, Leo. He expressed that when he thinks of his mother, he remembers the hard work and dedication she put into them. He said she wanted her children to be happy, and her happiness was their happiness. He stressed that they would always remember this. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Michael Reese. In February 2015, around 8 p.m., the Morris Police Department received a call from a woman named Cindy Reese, 40. She reported that when she returned home from the store, she found the front door wide open. Inside, she found items scattered on the floor. Cindy attempted to contact her husband, Michael, but he did not answer. Feeling scared, she did not go further into the house. Instead, she went to a landline near the main entrance, called the police, and then walked outside. After the call, at 9:11 p.m., Cindy contacted Michael's father and informed him that their home had likely been burglarized and asked him to come immediately. Michael and Cindy lived in the Morris Center on Bank Street, right across from a police station. The police quickly went to Michael's house. When they arrived, they found Cindy standing outside looking scared. Inside the home, police found a chaotic scene with a table overturned and furniture scattered about. They soon found Michael Reese, 40. At the back of the home, he was found dead on the floor in an unusual position. Michael had been shot in the back of the head. Michael Reese was born in July 1974 in Alabama. From a young age, he loved fishing. Michael finished high school and attended college, where he studied computer technology, eventually securing a job in that field. He was skilled with computers and often helped others. Although Michael got married, his first marriage ended in divorce due to his wife's infidelity. He didn't dwell on this loss since they had no children and continued to seek the right partner for himself. In 2008, Michael was introduced to Cindy by a mutual friend. They were nearly the same age, and a strong connection quickly developed between them, leading to a passionate romance. Cindy was born in January 1975 in Alabama. Her father served as an assistant pastor in a Baptist church, and she often accompanied him to work as a child. Growing up, Cindy was a model student who adhered to the rules. She graduated from college with a degree in accounting. In 1995, Cindy married, but her first marriage ended in tragedy in 2007 when she returned home from work to find her husband deceased. He had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Cindy was devastated by her husband's death. A year later, in 2008, she met Michael Reese, and they fell in love. They married on September 5, 2009, and spent their honeymoon at Disneyland. After the wedding, they moved into Michael's grandmother's house in Morris. Cindy worked as an accountant at the Jefferson County Courthouse, while Michael was a computer technician at St. Vincent's Hospital in Birmingham. The couple had no children and, like many in Morris, spent a significant amount of time at church. Cindy, who grew up in a Lutheran family, convinced Michael to join the Sardis Baptist Church. After his baptism, they attended services together every Wednesday and Sunday. Cindy was also the music director of the church. Unfortunately, Michael received sad news when his mother was diagnosed with cancer. Concerned about her health, Michael visited her often and spent much of his time caring for her. On February 14, 2015, Michael celebrated Valentine's Day with his mother, but just 4 days later, on February 18, he was tragically murdered. Michael was known as a kind and positive young man, generous and trustworthy. Police quickly opened an investigation into his murder. Michael had been shot once in the back of the head. Inside the house, everything was in disarray. The police suspected that the Michael family was targeted for a robbery that went wrong. On the table, there was still uneaten fast food. However, investigation revealed no evidence of a break-in through the front door. Hours after the murder, Cindy Reese was taken to the police station for questioning. She explained that on February 18, she and her husband, Michael, had gone to work during the day. In the evening, Michael picked her up and they visited Cindy's mother. Around 6 p.m., they attended a church service, which ended at 7 p.m. They then stopped at a cafe to order some fast food and take it home. As they were getting home, Cindy suddenly remembered that she needed to buy groceries and told Michael that she would go and get the groceries and hurry home. Michael took the fast food and left. Cindy went to the supermarket and was gone for about 30 minutes. When she returned home, she found the front door wide open. Worried, she looked inside and saw things scattered everywhere. She called out to her husband but got no answer, which scared her, and she decided not to go any further into the house. Worried, she immediately called the police and walked out. At that time, she did not know that her husband, Michael, was dead. Cindy reported that a .38 revolver and some jewelry were missing from their home. When asked who might have killed Michael, Cindy said that as she was driving near her home, she saw a strange man wearing a black hoodie walking down the street. She also shared that she and Michael were planning to have children and had even added a room to their home. They were in the process of renovating, with the assistance of a contractor. Cindy speculated that this man might be involved in the murder. The interrogation lasted for several hours. During this time, Cindy listed all of her close friends, co-workers, and acquaintances that she and Michael had interacted with. Police noticed that when Cindy mentioned an old family friend, she appeared very happy. Meanwhile, the entire town knew that Cindy was having an affair. Although everyone suspected her secret relationship, Cindy denied it and refused to admit to any adulterous behavior. Her lover was Jeffrey Brown, the pastor of the Baptist church. Church members mentioned that they had seen Jeffrey and Cindy kissing in the car several times, but for some reason, no one spoke up about it. During questioning, Cindy denied having an affair with Jeffrey, claiming that they were just friends who occasionally walked around town together. Jeffrey was also questioned. He stated that on the evening of February 18th, he was in another city, 50 miles away from Michael's family home, and had nothing to do with Michael's murder. Jeffrey openly admitted to having a romantic relationship with Cindy. They first met in August 2013 when Jeffrey was a candidate for pastor at Sardis Baptist Church. At the time, Cindy was a pastor and worship leader at the church, and she had been married to Michael for 4 years. Jeffrey was also married to a woman named Noelle and had 2 children. Michael's family developed a close friendship with Jeffrey. They spent time together and went on vacations. However, in late 2013, a secret affair began between Jeffrey and Cindy. This affair did not go unnoticed by church members, leading to rumors. As a result, Jeffrey was forced to leave the Baptist church because the leadership believed that an adulterer was not fit to be a pastor or a role model for the congregation. Before becoming a pastor, Jeffrey was a Marine, a police officer, and then a hairdresser. At the time of the Michael family tragedy, he was working as a pest control specialist. Jeffrey and Cindy continued their affair, and Jeffrey divorced his wife, Noelle. However, Cindy chose to stay with her husband, Michael. During questioning, Jeffrey expressed his frustration with Cindy's unwillingness to leave Michael, claiming that Michael had abused her. Despite the accusations, Jeffrey denied any involvement in the murder. After questioning Jeffrey, Cindy confirmed that she was indeed having an affair with him. She revealed that her relationship with Michael was fading. He spent too much time on his phone and playing video games, often neglecting her. On weekends, Michael enjoyed fishing and the couple rarely had intimate moments. In the summer of 2014, Cindy confessed to her husband, Michael, that she had cheated on him. Although he was understandably upset, Michael assured her that he did not want a divorce. The couple made an effort to repair their relationship. To celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary, they visited Disneyland, hoping to rekindle the romance they once had. Michael was aware that Jeffrey, Cindy's lover, had intentions of winning her over, which made him fearful for his family's well-being. While being questioned about her relationship, Cindy talked about her time with Jeffrey. When asked if Jeffrey could hurt Michael, she replied, "Of course not, Jeffrey is a very religious man." The investigation into the case is still ongoing. Police have not found any witnesses or surveillance footage to confirm that a stranger wearing a black hoodie was seen walking down the street on February 18th. A contractor who was doing renovations for Michael's family has a solid alibi. He was at the church at the time of the crime. The initial theory of a robbery was dismissed because there were no signs of forced entry. While some items were missing from the house, most of the jewelry was intact. It appears the killer intentionally created a mess by overturning tables, throwing blankets on the floor, and making it look like a robbery. Cindy claimed that she was in the store at the time of the murder. She said she bought orange juice and ham. When she checked out, she added a few small items to her cart and paid for everything. The police found it odd that Cindy would rush to the store when their refrigerator was already full. They had eaten ham and orange juice for breakfast, so it seemed like there was no real need to buy those things. Additionally, Michael and Cindy bought fast food for dinner. Cindy loved good food and her relatives often commented on this. People commented that Cindy would not let her hot dinner at home get cold and would not go to the store without eating her favorite hamburger and fries first. Police went to Cindy's workplace. In her office, they found a wedding photo of her and Michael displayed on a shelf, framed with hearts. Below, next to her computer, was a photo of Cindy with Jeffrey. Police also discovered financial documents showing that Cindy had paid for the apartment where Jeffrey lived using her credit card. Jeffrey had frequent financial problems. In addition, the couple shared a bank account and Cindy had always supported Jeffrey financially. Police also discovered cell phone records that showed what happened on the day of the murder. Evidence from Jeffrey's cell phone showed that Jeffrey was near Michael's home at the time of Michael's murder, specifically at a gas station. Police also uncovered a disturbing incident that occurred a few months before Michael's death. Jeffrey had spoken to two of his co-workers, who were drivers, and asked if they could kill the man who had murdered his wife. Jeffrey offered to pay the two co-workers with money in his car as payment, but did not specify who the target was. He only mentioned that the man drove a white Honda Accord and worked at St. Vincent's Hospital. The description matched Michael Reese, but his co-workers declined the offer and reported Jeffrey's alarming request to the police. Less than a month after Michael was murdered, Cindy Reese and Jeffrey Brown were arrested on March 11, 2015. Neither of them admitted guilt. Police believe that on the night of the murder, Michael and Cindy returned home with takeout and intended to have dinner together. When Michael went to the back door to let the dog in, Cindy shot him in the back of the head with a revolver she kept at home. After the shooting, she created a mess, took several valuables, and went to the store. On her way, she disposed of the gun and jewelry, then returned home and called 911. Police are convinced that both Cindy and Jeffrey were involved in the murder, with Jeffrey likely being nearby at the time and possibly helping Cindy afterward. After Cindy's arrest, she was released from prison and lived freely while awaiting trial. She chose not to post bail for Jeffrey, who remained in custody. Just days before his trial in August 2016, Jeffrey sought a plea deal that would allow him to plead guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter in exchange for testifying against Cindy. He said that Cindy had instigated Michael's murder, explaining that she was afraid to divorce her husband because she was concerned about how her family would react. Jeffrey mentioned that Cindy had previously expressed a desire to kill her husband, which he initially interpreted as a joke. On the night of the murder, he claimed to have overheard everything that happened between Michael and Cindy on his cell phone. He reported hearing the couple arguing both in the car and at home, as well as gunshots. After Cindy killed her husband, she asked Jeffrey to help her get rid of the gun. They arranged to meet at a gas station, where she gave him the gun along with some jewelry, which he discarded. Cindy's trial began in November 2016, and she denied all of Jeffrey's allegations. She admitted to meeting Jeffrey at the gas station but said he asked her to come because he was out of money for gas. Cindy said she gave him $15 to help him. During the trial, she maintained that she and Michael had no intention of getting a divorce and wanted to work on their marriage. She also claimed that she no longer had any feelings for Jeffrey and accused him of stalking her, her family, and their home. Cindy's arguments were dismissed, as Cindy had not provided financial support to Jeffrey while at the gas station. Police also discovered that Cindy had frequently exchanged explicit photos with Jeffrey, suggesting that their relationship had not ended. Cindy's lawyers argued that she had no motive to kill her husband and placed the blame squarely on Jeffrey. The defense portrayed Jeffrey as obsessive, impulsive, and manipulative. No traces of gunpowder or blood were found on Cindy's body or clothing, and the angle of the gunshot wound indicated that the shooter was taller than Cindy, about the same height as Jeffrey. To this day, it remains unclear who shot Michael and what exactly happened that night. Prosecutors argue that Cindy did the killing, with Jeffrey helping her dispose of the weapon. In 2016, Jeffrey Brown was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years in prison, with eligibility for parole in 2036. On January 11, 2017, Cindy Reese was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Her family believes she is innocent and is determined to fight for her release. In 2019, Michael's parents discovered that Cindy had been transferred from a maximum security prison to a lower security facility near the site of the murder. Michael's family went to court and successfully had her returned to a maximum security prison. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Christopher Sutton. On Sunday, August 22, 2004, the Sutton family experienced a devastating tragedy following Susan's 57th birthday celebration. The celebration included Susan, her husband John, their son Christopher, his girlfriend Juliet, and family friend Teddy Montoda. After the party, Susan and John went to bed in separate rooms at their home in the upscale Coral Gables neighborhood near Miami, Florida. One night, a tragic event occurred. Susan usually slept in a separate room because her husband, John, snored loudly. While they were sleeping, a car stopped about 4 blocks away from their house. A man dressed in black was approaching their house with the intention of killing Susan and John. The attacker was armed with a 9mm Glock pistol and broke into Susan's house. He first went to John's bedroom and shot him twice in the head. He then moved to the room where Susan was sleeping, shot her 6 times, and left. The police were notified of the incident. Police and ambulances were dispatched to the scene shortly afterwards. Unfortunately, doctors determined that Susan, 57, had died. John was still alive but had suffered serious injuries and had lost a lot of blood. He was taken to hospital, where paramedics worked frantically to save him, although his chances of survival were slim. Before being taken to hospital, John said that he could not see the shooter in the dark and did not know who it was. Forensic experts began examining the crime scene, while police questioned neighbors and searched for surveillance cameras. Although no cameras were found, but neighbors reported seeing a suspicious man dressed in dark clothing running away from the house. There were no signs of forced entry. The killer had accessed the home through the sliding glass doors. The house was intact, with no money or jewelry taken, indicating to police that this was not a robbery. The attack was clearly targeted at killing Susan and John. But the motive behind the murder remains unknown. Melissa Sutton was 18 years old when her parents were attacked. As a freshman living on her own, she couldn't attend the celebration at their house. She was devastated to learn about her mother's death. Overwhelmed with grief, she went to see her father in the hospital. She described him as looking very unwell. John had miraculously survived 2 gunshot wounds to the head, leaving doctors astonished that he was still alive, although he remained in serious condition. When John woke up in intensive care, he realized he was blind. Additionally, he was experiencing severe shock. He felt unsafe in the hospital, constantly fearing that the killer might return. This left John feeling endangered. He was eager to leave the hospital and find a safe place to hide. His fears were taken seriously, so a guard was assigned to his room, and police patrolled the area around the clock. Due to the severity of his injuries, John was also unable to hear anything. He didn't hear the shots fired at his wife and was unaware of what happened to Susan. As he slowly started to recover, he asked Melissa how his wife was. She did not answer because the police had advised her not to say anything that might upset John further. He later found out that his wife had been murdered by her attacker. The news was a huge shock to him. Susan's death was a huge loss for the whole family. She had devoted her life to being a loving mother. Susan spent many years as an intensive care nurse, a respected profession in the United States. Her career ended in the late 1970s when she decided to stay at home with her husband, John, after the birth of their first child, Christopher. They made this choice because Susan had been unable to conceive for 7 years, at which point they decided to adopt a daughter, Melissa. The police discovered that John had built a successful business and may have had enemies. They also learned that he had received previous threats of violence. The police investigated everyone who had had animosity toward John and Susan, but they all had solid alibis. While the police searched the crime scene for evidence, they discovered that Susan's purse, jewelry belonging to her or her husband, were still intact. Although these items were visible, the police planned to interview John, but he had difficulty communicating. However, he was able to provide some useful information. Although he could not identify the shooter, he recalled seeing a dark figure at the door. The attacker may have been dressed all in black or may have been African American. John could not be certain in the darkness. Unfortunately, this information was not useful to the police. The police decided to speak with Teddy, a family friend who was at the party before the shooting. They visited his house for an interview. Teddy explained that he was on the phone with Susan at the exact moment the shooting happened. He heard a gunshot, followed by silence. Feeling frightened, he called the police, got into his car, and rushed to the Susan family's home, arriving just after the police. Teddy was very shaken by the attack on Susan. However, the police found his account unusual. They questioned why he was still talking to Susan when everyone else had already left the party, leading them to suspect an affair. Teddy clarified that he was not just a family friend but also a business partner. He claimed that they were discussing an urgent business matter and that he frequently communicated with both John and Susan to handle various issues, so he didn't find his late conversation with Susan abnormal. During the conversation, Teddy told the police that the shooters were professional and trained shooters. The police found this information interesting and took Teddy's gun for testing. Teddy was also called into the station for a lie detector test. The police believed he was hiding something and continued to question him. Teddy eventually confessed that he was in a romantic relationship with Susan. The police have often seen love triangles that can lead people to commit terrible acts. However, Teddy's gun did not match the weapon used in the attack and his phone was tracked to a location far from the crime scene at the time of the shooting. Teddy denied any involvement in the attack on John and Susan. Although his lie detector test was deemed inconclusive, it was suggested that his anxiety stemmed from trying to keep his affair with Susan a secret to avoid damaging his relationship with his friend John. John had a strong and trusting relationship with Teddy. Shortly before the incident, John and Teddy received one of the largest payouts in their law firm's history, over $1 million, and they celebrated this occasion extravagantly. Teddy was ruled out as a suspect, and the police decided to investigate other family members instead. An examination revealed that John could not have physically inflicted the shot on himself, so he was not considered a suspect. Their daughter Melissa has a solid alibi because she was in another city and also passed a lie detector test. The police then investigated Christopher Sutton. He had a girlfriend named Juliet. They had attended a family party together. Christopher quickly claimed that he and Juliet had gone to the movies the night before and provided their tickets as evidence. Juliet confirmed his story. The police then requested the cinema's surveillance camera footage, confirming that they had indeed gone to the cinema that night and confirming their alibi. After leaving the hospital, John moved in with Christopher so he could care for him for a while. However, disturbing evidence was discovered that Christopher actually wanted to kill his parents. He even threatened to kill his mother during a fight. Christopher became the prime suspect in the case. Additionally, Christopher had a criminal record that included vandalizing a teacher's home. When Christopher was 16, his parents, John and Susan, decided to send him to a reform school. Christopher was aggressive and had trouble controlling his anger, which made it difficult for him to socialize with other teenagers. He changed schools at least 6 times. He often skipped school. John would drop him off at the main entrance, walk to the door, but then Christopher would sneak out through another exit and go do his own thing. However, his absences were not his biggest problem. He also got involved in some criminal activities. One day, he and a group of friends broke into a teacher's house, causing damage and graffiti. As a result, Christopher was arrested and the teacher filed a lawsuit against him. The damage was estimated to be in excess of $50,000, and his parents had to pay it. Christopher's family had no financial problems and could easily pay the fine. However, his family was frustrated with their son's out-of-control behavior and did not know how to handle him. Christopher was a difficult teenager who had no respect for adult authority. His rebellion began with his love of piercings and tattoos, which his parents strongly disapproved of. Despite their efforts, they were unable to change his behavior, which led to more problems. One day, Christopher pointed an unloaded rifle at his mother and sister, threatening to kill them. Shortly before Christopher's 16th birthday, Susan discovered a note in his room that outlined a plan to kill his parents to inherit their money. Susan informed John about the note, and they confronted Christopher, who dismissed it as a joke. However, when his parents saw the note, they became frightened. From that point on, they were afraid to be alone with their son in the house. They even sought legal help, which led to a court-ordered rehabilitation program. Staff from a specialist organization forcibly transferred Christopher to a rehabilitation facility on the island of Samoa called Paradise Bay. It is a strict school for troubled youth. In 1998, when Christopher first arrived at this institution, his behavior became extremely aggressive, leading to him being restrained. Following this, he was taken to a remote camp in the mountains, where he was left tied up. The staff aimed to re-educate him through these strict measures. Typically, such severe discipline was effective and helped even the most challenging cases to improve. After spending a year in a behavior correction facility, Christopher sent his parents an emotional video message. In it, he described the violence he experienced there and accused his parents of not loving him for sending him to such a place. Upon hearing this, his parents visited institutions for troubled teenagers in Samoa but found nothing wrong. As a result, they did not believe Christopher's claims. They knew about the strict rules in place and believed they were intended to benefit troubled teens. Furthermore, Christopher was there under a court order, so his parents could not take him away. However, Christopher still hoped to leave the facility when he turned 18. John then received a court order stating that Christopher would remain in custody. The program at Paradise Bay was extended for another year, which surprised Christopher. But he had no choice but to remain at the facility. In 2000, Paradise Bay was closed after management faced multiple allegations of youth mistreatment. Christopher finally returned home on his 19th birthday, after 30 months at Paradise Bay. This situation raised concerns for the police, as his anger at being mistreated could be considered a motive for murder. After enduring such torture, Christopher may have felt the urge to take revenge on his parents. However, after returning from Paradise Bay, he changed. Christopher always showed that he had become a caring and calm son, especially in how he took care of his father following an incident. John could not believe that his son could be involved in the case, believing that Christopher had changed. However, the police suspected that Christopher had orchestrated the double murder, which was only partially successful because his father survived. Although Christopher had an alibi, he may have hired someone else to carry out the crime. The police needed to gather evidence to support their suspicions. So they brought him in for a second interview. In this conversation, Christopher reveals details that have not been revealed to the public and remain confidential. Christopher said he went to the scene of the incident. He saw the shooter walking down the hallway, and his mother Susan had been shot 6 times, information that was later confirmed during the investigation. Christopher also recounted the order in which the shots were fired and other key details. While Christopher appears distraught and cries over his mother's death, the police believe he is lying and is actually a criminal. However, Christopher was supported by his girlfriend Juliet, who also seemed shocked by the incident. She said she herself had been in shock for a long time, following the news of the shooting. Juliet met Christopher when she was 17, and he was 19, having just returned from a school for troubled youth. She described him as kind, polite and courteous, and he made a strong positive impression on her. He treated her like a true gentleman. So she could never imagine that he could commit murder. Juliet said that his parents welcomed her into their family. His mother, Susan, taught her how to apply makeup and helped her develop her dressing style. His father, John, also supported her by giving her a job at his law firm. The couple's parents supported them financially without expecting anything in return. They were happy to see the couple together. When police first encountered Christopher at the crime scene, it was shortly after he had been informed of the incident. He appeared to be very upset, and one officer noticed tears on his face. However, his initial statement to police during questioning shattered the impression of sadness. He quickly explained that he and Juliet had had dinner with their parents but left at around 9 p.m. to go to the movies. He then gave the police their movie tickets. Instead of asking how his parents were doing, he focused on justifying his actions and emphasized his alibi before any charges were brought. Police carefully reviewed surveillance footage from the cinema, which showed Christopher leaving after the movie around midnight. They noticed he immediately used his mobile phone to make a call, arousing curiosity about who he was contacting. The police quickly checked all his calls. Police later determined that Christopher had contacted a man named Garrett Kopp 31 times in the days leading up to the murder, which raised suspicions. Garrett, a police officer with a criminal record, had come to the attention of police. They suspected he might be involved in the crime. The case drew attention to Garrett's troubled past, including multiple arrests, adding to police suspicions. Police began to consider Garrett as a potential suspect. At the time of the case, he was out on bail. When police examined the weapon used in the murder, they found it to be very similar to Garrett's Glock, so he was taken to the station for questioning. Garrett had a tense conversation with the police and later admitted to attacking John and Susan. However, Garrett insisted that he did not act on his own. He said that Christopher had threatened to kill him and his son if he did not comply. Garrett insisted that the idea for the attack was entirely Christopher's. He also said that Christopher had given him the gun and had left the door unlocked, allowing him easy access to the house. The police arrested Garrett and charged him with murder, but his testimony was not enough to keep Christopher in custody. Juliet was questioned by police who believed she had more information than she was revealing. Despite their efforts, she denied any involvement and insisted on her innocence for several hours. The interrogation lasted 13 hours in total, but the police did not record it. Later, Juliet alleged that police had threatened her with arrest to force a confession and acted provocatively during the questioning. However, she eventually admitted that Christopher felt a strong resentment towards his parents for placing him in a facility for troubled teenagers. Recently, his parents tried to push him to get a job and start covering his own costs, which he found unacceptable, and this led to family conflicts. During questioning, Juliet revealed that Christopher had been planning revenge on his parents for years. He often spoke about the inheritance and how they could live without worries if he could take everything his parents had earned. However, she didn't take his threats seriously. The police had gathered enough evidence to obtain an arrest warrant for Christopher Sutton. However, by that time, he had disappeared. This was a crucial moment for the police, as they feared that Christopher might return to harm John. Fortunately, the police were able to locate and arrest Christopher, charging him with the murder of his mother and attempted murder of his father. Garrett Kopp and Christopher Sutton were eventually tried separately, and both faced the death penalty. Christopher, however, maintained that he had no role in planning the crime. The defense argued that the police were unfair, claiming that the police pressured Juliet, which influenced her testimony. After Garrett learned that he could face the death penalty, Garrett decided to cooperate with the prosecution by pleading guilty to a lesser charge, which was in his favor. He was then sentenced to 30 years in prison. The prosecution's case took a turn when Juliet appeared in court to testify. She revealed that Christopher had often expressed anger at his parents for not giving him money, even saying that they deserved to die for their actions. The defense argued that much of Juliet's testimony was given under police pressure and should be excluded from the case. However, the judge denied this request. In court, Juliet maintained that she had been truthful during her interrogation with the police. She stated that she viewed Christopher's anger as mere frustration and never believed he would go on to commit such serious crimes. After Juliet's testimony, John, the surviving father, shared his thoughts. After hearing all the witness testimony, John believed that Christopher was capable of committing the crime. John noted that even after leaving the hospital, Christopher continued to try to manage the family's finances, which led him to believe that Christopher was involved in the crime. When it was Christopher's turn to speak, he accused Garrett of attacking their parents due to his drug addiction. Christopher highlighted several moments when Garrett was out of control due to drugs, claiming that during those times he was dangerous and capable of committing any crime. Christopher also mentioned that he kept drugs in Susan's bedroom closet. The Garrett might have entered the house to steal illegal drugs. However, the prosecutor argued that the scene did not appear to be a burglary, everything was intact, even the money and jewelry were intact. If it was a burglary, Garrett would have taken valuables. In his defense, Christopher claimed that he had changed and overcome the anger, resentment, and disappointment he felt towards his parents for sending him to a special school. He believed that he had changed for the better. After extensive deliberation, the jury found Christopher Sutton guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. Christopher was shocked by the verdict because he was sure that he would be acquitted. Christopher received 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Currently, survivor John Sutton is putting in great effort to regain his eyesight. He has formed a new relationship and started a family, and at 70 years old, he continues to practice law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jeffrey Hazelwood. Natalie Henderson, Carter Davis, and Jeffrey Hazelwood are 3 residents of Roswell. Natalie and Carter are friendly, intelligent, and optimistic. Natalie is actively involved in school activities, often representing the school at social events, while Carter balances academics and sports. Jeffrey, on the other hand, struggles with his studies, with his grades and academic performance significantly lower than his peers. As a teenager, Jeffrey was sent to a military-style school, and after graduating, he remained unemployed for several years. He later found a job in government, which allowed him to support himself. Jeffrey had a challenging childhood. He was born on July 10, 1996, into difficult circumstances. His mother, Sherry, was only 19 years old when he was born, and Sherry's partner abandoned her before Jeffrey was born. During her pregnancy, Sherry struggled with drug use. Those around her realized that she was incapable of caring for a child. As a result, when Jeffrey was 6 months old, he moved in with his grandparents. Although Jeffrey's grandparents loved him, his troubled relationship with his mother leading to him being labeled a difficult child. Throughout his teenage years, there were many incidents reported in Jeffrey's family. Jeffrey frequently engaged in dangerous activities. On one occasion, he wrote a note saying he was going to spend a few days in the wilderness testing his survival skills. In another disturbing incident, he took his grandfather's gun, prompting neighbors to call the police. His actions increasingly worried his grandparents, who attempted to hide the weapons. Despite their efforts, Jeffrey, who was smart and determined, successfully broke into a safe and took the knives and swords he loved. By 2013, when Jeffrey turned 16, his grandmother felt the need to report his troubling behavior to the police, likely out of concern for her safety and that of others. Just weeks earlier, he had warned her that his patience would eventually wear thin, and he might hurt someone, although he didn't specify who or when. As a result, Jeffrey was sent to a military school. After returning, he entered a relationship that he cherished deeply. His social media accounts were filled with expressions of love for his girlfriend, mixed with images of wolves, dark quotes, and posts about anger and mortality. No one seemed to notice or help Jeffrey. Eventually, the city of Roswell had a serious problem. On August 1, 2016, a Monday morning, a driver was making a delivery at the local grocery store. At 6 a.m., just as he approached the store, his peaceful morning turned into a nightmare. As he turned the corner toward the delivery area, he was shocked to see 2 bodies lying side by side in a parking lot, both dead and covered in blood. Panicked, he called the police to report what he had seen. Police quickly arrived at the scene and discovered the bodies of 2 young people. A man and a woman, both dead. Police spotted 2 cars parked nearby, and when they ran the license plates, they discovered they belonged to Carter Davis and Natalie Henderson. The young couple came from middle-class families, and neither had a criminal record or any violations. The investigation began with a search of the vehicle and a review of surveillance camera footage from the supermarket. The video showed Carter and Natalie driving through the parking lot at approximately 3 a.m. before disappearing behind the building. Additionally, just minutes before they arrived, a silver Honda had parked in front of the store. After Carter and Natalie passed the Honda, a tall man with long, unkempt hair got out of the Honda and followed them on foot, but then disappeared from view of the surveillance camera. His facial features were unclear, and the video did not capture his license plate number. All police could determine was that the car was silver, a 1990 or 1998 model, and had mismatched wheels. Police contacted the Bureau of Investigation for assistance in finding a suspect. The task was difficult because they needed to compile a list of all Honda owners in the city. After sifting through the data, they narrowed the list down to about 650 vehicles and their owners. This process of elimination was long and difficult, requiring patience and effort on the part of the police. However, their persistence paid off. On August 3, 2016, just 2 days after the discovery of Carter and Natalie's bodies, police located a driver's license that belonged to a Honda owner. This owner, Jeffrey Hazelwood, 20, lived in Roswell and was known to police because of his long black hair. His grandparents were shocked when some police officers knocked on their front door. Their surprise quickly turned to concern when the officers asked about their grandson Jeffrey. They informed the police that they did not know where he was. Jeffrey's grandparents said that they had kicked him out of the house 2 days ago. The police then investigated and found that Jeffrey was staying at his girlfriend's house. They knew the address and set up a perimeter around the house. After finding the boy's car parked in the driveway, the police waited nearby, patiently waiting for Jeffrey to show up. Hours later, Jeffrey finally came out of the house, got into his car and drove away. Undercover police observed Jeffrey as he arrived at a gas station, walked around, and changed his clothes. At that point, officers surrounded him and arrested him on suspicion of the murders of Natalie Henderson and Carter Davis before he could react. Initially, Jeffrey denied killing anyone, but after being held for several days, he was questioned by Officer Jennifer Bennett, who was assigned to Jeffrey's case. During this interrogation, several strange details came to light. When arrested, Jeffrey insisted that he was an innocent bystander and that he had not killed anyone. However, during questioning, he claimed that another man had pressured him into committing the crime. As the interrogation continued, he stopped mentioning his accomplice. Additionally, Jeffrey claimed that a voice in his head had told him to kill Natalie and Carter. Despite Jeffrey's numerous lies and confusing statements, Police Officer Bennett was able to piece together what happened on the night of August 1st. Jeffrey said his troubles began when his grandparents kicked him out of the house. To clear his head, he went to a local Waffle House, but since he had nowhere to stay for the night, he decided to park at the local grocery store. He arrived around 3 a.m. and sat in his car. While he was sitting there, 2 cars pulled into the parking lot, drove past him, circled the building. Feeling bored and lonely, Jeffrey decided to follow them on foot. After the 2 cars parked side by side, Carter Davis got out of the car and got into the back seat of Natalie's car. Natalie then joined him in the back seat, saying they wanted some private time together. Unbeknownst to them, Jeffrey was hiding behind the nearby electrical panel, observing their interaction. However, Jeffrey climbed up a nearby service ladder to get a better view from the roof of the car. Jeffrey later claimed that he did not watch for long. Sadly, Jeffrey obtained his grandfather's gun after breaking into a safe just before being kicked out of his house. What he did next was horrific. He climbed down from the roof, approached Natalie's car, and demanded that Carter exit the vehicle. He struck Carter with the gun. In that moment of panic, Jeffrey realized Carter was taller and stronger, putting him at a disadvantage in a physical struggle. In a shocking act, he raised the gun and shot Carter in the head at close range, then ordered Natalie to get out of the car. Without detailing what he did to her, Jeffrey later shot Natalie in the back of the head after she turned away. After both victims were dead, he ransacked Natalie's car, took her wallet, and drove away. However, Jeffrey's criminal activities did not stop there. That night, he was found at a gas station using Natalie's credit card to fill up his car. Surveillance cameras even recorded Jeffrey wearing a mask to hide his identity. During questioning, he stated that despite having the mask and gun, he did not take any further action. Jeffrey stated that he needed the mask to hide his identity from the person who ordered him to kill Natalie and Carter. After stopping at the gas station, he returned to the bodies. He placed the bodies on the asphalt as they had been found that morning. He then called his girlfriend and asked if he could stay with her until he could sort out his family issues. She had no idea that he had just killed someone, and she welcomed him into her home. Eventually, the police tracked him down and arrested him. During the trial, his behavior was highly erratic. He talked to himself, claimed to hear voices, and even spoke with a British accent, at one point sat shaking, made erratic head movements, and talked to himself. He was also observed conversing with an imaginary dog and pretending to hit it on the head. At a later hearing, Officer Bennett shared Jeffrey's confession, revealing the disturbing details he described about that night. He said he pulled Natalie out of the car, forced her onto the hood, and then shot her in the head. The defense argued that Jeffrey exhibited symptoms of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, Asperger's syndrome, and dissociative identity disorder. While each of these conditions can be controlled individually, the combination of all 4 conditions makes him an extremely unstable person. However, none of these conditions had been formally diagnosed. As such, he was deemed competent to stand trial and, with appropriate treatment, could become stable enough to understand the proceedings. Given the overwhelming amount of evidence, including forensic material from surveillance camera footage and seized items, the proof against him was strong. The prosecution quickly built a strong case against Jeffrey. The initial trial was scheduled for September 9, 2016, but it was postponed multiple times because he needed treatment. He was moved to a secure psychiatric hospital to continue his care until a new trial date was established. A hearing was conducted to evaluate Jeffrey's competence, particularly his ability to understand the legal proceedings. While he occasionally rocked in his chair, psychologists could not pinpoint his specific mental disorders. However, they diagnosed him with psychosis, which is a disorder that causes a disconnection from reality rather than a mental illness itself. Finally, on May 17, 2017, Jeffrey appeared in court as he was nearing recovery. He was not allowed to speak during treatment, so his attorney spoke on his behalf. The judge offered him a plea deal regarding the murders of Carter and Natalie, which Jeffrey accepted. He was then sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring that Jeffrey would spend the rest of his life in prison or a mental hospital. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Julissa Thaler. In May 2022, the case of Julissa Thaler shocked the United States. She was sentenced to life in prison for a heinous crime. Julissa had a difficult life with many problems, but many people still found it hard to believe that she could commit such a terrible act. In court, she pleaded innocent, claiming that the United States government agencies were largely to blame. This complicated story began on December 15, 2015, when Julissa gave birth to her son Eli, who was diagnosed with Townes-Brocks syndrome, a genetic disorder. The pregnancy was carried to full term, and Eli underwent several surgeries in the first months of his life. Although intellectually healthy, Eli had mobility problems, kidney disease, and needed a hearing aid. However, he was a happy and sociable child. At 22, Julissa ended her relationship with Torrey Hart, the father of Eli, and moved in with her mother for a while. During her youth, she began facing significant challenges. From ages 13 to 18, she frequently stayed in psychiatric hospitals for treatment of drug and alcohol addiction. She had conflicts with her parents and ran away from home multiple times. These issues persisted after her child was born. In particular, she was closely monitored by the Department of Child Support Services in Minnesota because, in 2017, her child did not receive necessary medications and appropriate treatment. Julissa was also criticized for not adequately meeting her son's needs. In 2019, Julissa claimed that Torrey had threatened to blow her up in her car. This allegation was investigated and found to be false, as Julissa had made up the story during a psychotic episode to prevent the father from seeing his son. Torrey was very devoted to the child and cherished their time together. Torrey also accused Julissa of being incapable of caring for their child. An investigation confirmed these claims, and after visits from social workers, Eli was temporarily placed with a foster family by Julissa in October 2020. During the visit, social workers found that the boy did not have proper clothing, was wearing pajamas around the house, and lived in a filthy environment. The first-floor bathroom was flooded and had many products scattered around, some of which were rotting at the time of the inspection. The refrigerator did not have enough food. At the end of 2021, Torrey returned to family court, concerned about his son. Julissa, the boy's mother, was unable to provide a safe living environment. She had been evicted from her rental home, was experiencing mental health issues, and had started using illegal drugs again. This situation made it unsafe for the Eli to stay with her. Additionally, the boy started exhibiting serious behavioral problems. For example, he pushed another child off a slide and kicked a child in the throat. Eli began destructive behaviors like chewing his shirt excessively, had difficulty sleeping, spoke in a baby-like manner, and developed a stutter. Tori went to court to raise her concerns about her son's unusual behavior. The police also noticed Julisa's violations. She missed mandatory drug tests. There were suspicions that she had shown her son inappropriate videos after a blood test confirmed that illegal substances were found in her system. One notable story that illustrates Julisa's attitude toward her son involves her picking up a tumbler that had fallen from a steep mountainside during a hike. She left the sick Eli alone at the top of the mountain while she went down to retrieve the broken cup. Social workers evaluated her and determined that she was not competent to judge the risk, possibly due to the effects of her medications or her mental health issues. However, it was the social worker who was concerned about the situation who advocated for Julisa to have custody of the child. Officers were concerned about Julisa's lack of self-control and her refusal to attend weekly therapy. They observed that she had committed multiple traffic violations, such as speeding and reckless driving, which raised concerns about her ability to safely care for her child. However, officers noted that there was insufficient reason to revoke her parental rights because she had demonstrated self-control in court appearances. On May 10, 2022, Julisa was awarded full custody of her child. Sadly, just 10 days after she regained custody, tragedy struck. On May 20, 2022, at approximately 7 a.m., someone called 911 to report a silver car driving on wheels without tires. When the police arrived, they found Julisa driving. She looked disheveled and had blood on her hands and face. Julisa explained that the blood in the car was from deer meat that a butcher had given her, and she mentioned that the blood on her hands and face was from accidentally getting it on. The officers were suspicious and confused as to why she did not clean herself. They noticed what looked like human flesh around the armrest, but Julisa insisted it was animal flesh and could not explain the poor condition of the car. Finding her story suspicious, the police decided to investigate further. Julisa became very upset when she was asked to sit in the patrol car while the police ran a background check on her and her car. The officers determined that neither she nor her car were wanted for any crimes, but they still found the car suspicious. To prevent further problems, the police drove her home but took her car for further inspection, suspecting that it might be linked to a crime. During their investigation, they discovered a bullet hole in the passenger seat armrest, possibly from a handgun. In the trunk they found a pistol and a bloody blanket covering the body of a child. Police quickly returned to Julisa's home, but she was gone. Security cameras showed her leaving with a man just before police arrived. Police tracked them down and arrested them both at an apartment. Before leaving, Julisa attempted to wash her bloody clothes. She was taken to the Hennepin County Jail, where her mental health worsened, causing delays in the investigation. She was eventually charged with the murder of her son, Eli. Forensic experts confirmed that Eli was sitting in the back seat when 9 shots were fired. The boy's father, Tori, was devastated by the loss. Tori's pain was compounded when social workers refused to let him save his son, despite his efforts. It was discovered that Julisa had been experiencing severe mental health issues shortly before she regained custody of her son. Furthermore, she had prevented Tori from seeing Eli for an extended period of time by making baseless accusations against him. The trial was set for 2023 after a psychiatric evaluation determined that Julisa was sane and able to understand the allegations against her. Julisa denied killing her son and was described by those who knew her as non-aggressive, although she struggled with substance abuse. Her loved ones maintained that she truly loved her son and could not have committed such an act, while others believed that her mental health and addiction issues contributed to the tragedy. On social media, Julisa identified herself as Aquarius. A mother, a lawyer, a feminist, and a police officer. However, evidence such as video footage showed that she had purchased a handgun and ammunition and left her apartment with a wrapped item. A child's car seat with a large bullet hole was discovered, and surveillance footage captured Julissa attempting to wash blood off her hands at a gas station. Police also found Google searches, including questions about blood counts in a 6-year-old, and methods of concealing evidence. Then the police investigated. Julissa bought a $400,000 life insurance policy for her son. However, she was told that the maximum coverage was only $50,000. Despite this, she persisted in convincing the bank employees to give her a larger policy, which impressed the employees. It was also revealed that Julissa had recently developed an interest in weapons. She began going to a shooting range with a friend, which surprised her friend. Julissa was often seen leaving her apartment with a handgun wrapped in a gray blanket. The blanket and the handgun were both discovered in the trunk of her car on the day of the murder. Police also investigated her boyfriend, Robert, who had left the house with Julissa before her arrest. Robert, a childhood friend with whom she had a good relationship, denied any involvement in the murder or conspiracy. Police found no evidence against him. During the trial, Robert was stunned by the evidence and the maximum sentence that could be given to Julissa. Robert helped reconstruct the events of that morning, when he last saw Eli alive. Julissa had told him that she would take Eli to school. But instead, she quietly brought a handgun. Instead of taking him to school, she shot him with her gun. Robert was horrified by the incident. He said that he had no idea that Julissa's plan was so terrible. He thought the boy was just a normal, friendly kid and that they had a good relationship. The prosecutor argued that Julissa meticulously planned the crime and, on that tragic day, brutally killed her son. The jury found Julissa Thaler guilty of first-degree murder and she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. She was 28 years old at the time of the trial. As the verdict was read, Julissa leaned back in her chair, put her head in her hands, and stared at the floor. In her final statement, she insulted the judge and denied any involvement in her son's death. After the trial, Torrey Hart, the boy's father, sued the county's Child Protection Service employees who granted full custody to the Julissa. He feels they share responsibility for his son's death. The court will hear this case in 2024. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Aisling Murphy. Aisling Murphy, born in 1998, was the youngest of 3 siblings. Her family lived in Blue Ball, Ireland, a peaceful town about an hour's drive from Dublin. Aisling grew up in a loving environment, influenced by her father's passion for music, particularly the bagpipes and violin. Inspired by him, she began studying traditional Irish music. She joined a youth choir in school and later became part of an orchestra, performing folk music at various events across Ireland and Great Britain. She was talented, independent, and sociable, which allowed her to integrate well with her team and feel comfortable on stage. After graduating from school, Aisling quickly sought employment. She was determined to achieve complete independence from her parents, so she began searching for full-time job opportunities right after receiving her diploma. Despite her career ambitions, she continued to nurture her love for music. She often performed for her relatives during special family gatherings on weekends, which further strengthened their connections. Aisling wanted to create her own family someday, but first, she focused on establishing herself. She went to college and became a first-grade teacher at a school where she had previously studied. This moment in her life was very meaningful. The teachers and students appreciated Aisling for her energy, kindness, and creativity. Aisling was truly suited for this role due to her strong moral character. She made a smooth transition from being an excellent student to becoming a wonderful teacher. Aisling was friendly, well-mannered, sweet, and self-assured. During her first week of work, she taught music on weekends, showing her passion for her job and her enjoyment of working with children. At 28, She had been in a relationship with her boyfriend, Ryan, for over 6 years. They met when Aisling was just 15. Initially, their romance didn't last, and they broke up after a few months. However, they eventually reunited, realizing that they were too young when they first started dating as teenagers. Their feelings for each other reignited, and they fell deeply in love, often talking about their future, including marriage and children. They had planned a trip in 2 days, but unfortunately, it seemed their dreams would not come to fruition. Aisling finished her workday and planned to go for a run along the Grand Canal in Tullamore. This was a routine activity for her, as she enjoyed fitness and outdoor recreation. She loved walking or running in beautiful locations, so she often visited the canal when she could. The Grand Canal was a popular spot for runners, featuring a designated path for walking. It was usually busy, which made Aisling comfortable going there alone. After work, Aisling got ready for her run. She first went home to change her clothes and tell her mother about her schedule. Her mother reassured her daughter that she was old enough to take care of herself and that there was no danger in this. Aisling left, and that was the last time her mother saw her alive. About an hour after Aisling left home, 2 runners warming up along the Grand Canal called for help. They were running on one side of the canal and saw a man attacking a girl on the opposite bank. Since they didn't have mobile phones, they ran to the nearest payphone to report the incident. They informed the emergency dispatcher that they had witnessed a threatening man assaulting one of the female runners. The witnesses confirmed that the victim was still alive when the attacker dragged her into the bushes. She screamed and fought back, desperately trying to push him away, but she was clearly outmatched. The dispatchers sent police officers to the specified location. Upon arrival, the police and a witness found the body of a young woman at the canal. The young girl, who showed no signs of life, was found to have been severely beaten, as the caller had reported. She had been pulled off the paved road and into the bushes, where she suffered physical abuse. Her face and neck were covered in cuts, and her hair was matted with dried blood. Paramedics arrived and attempted to resuscitate her for 10 minutes, but they were unable to save her and confirmed her death. While the exact cause of death remained unclear, it was evident she had been beaten badly. The body of the murdered girl was sent for an autopsy, which revealed stab and cut wounds on her neck. A forensic expert identified 11 injuries, primarily on the right side of her neck, including a cut throat that rendered her unable to call for help. Signs of possible strangulation were also found. The victim was identified as Aisling Murphy. On her hands, there were deep cuts, likely sustained during a struggle. Keys were discovered near her body, and it was determined she had used them defensively, gripping them tightly in an effort to fight off her attacker. The weapon used in the attack did not inflict enough damage to prevent the criminal from continuing his assault. Aisling died from severe blood loss caused by multiple stab wounds to her neck, leading to her death within minutes. Near her body, police found sunglasses and a mobile phone in her jacket pocket. An abandoned bicycle was also found nearby, likely belonging to the attacker. The criminal had already fled the scene after harming his innocent victim. The brutality of the attack was shocking, especially since it occurred in broad daylight in a crowded area with witnesses. 2 runners who were in the vicinity witnessed the crime. They observed both the attack and the assailant. They provided vital information to the police. The first witness, Emma, reported that she was walking her dog by the Grand Canal when she noticed a girl jogging. She saw a man on a bright green bicycle closely following the jogger. Initially, Emma thought they might be running together because the cyclist stayed so close to the girl. She described the cyclist as looking like a migrant, not Irish. He had yellowish skin, a short haircut, and was wearing a black tracksuit with red logos. Later, Emma met another witness, Jenna, and together they witnessed the cyclist attack the girl. The attack appeared sudden and unprovoked. Jenna witnessed the attack and provided a detailed account. Her description matched that of another witness, who reported that the victim screamed, threatening the attacker, but then suddenly fell silent. This silence was caused by a wound to Ashling's neck that severely severed her vocal cords. Later, Jenna screamed loudly, threatening to call the police. Despite the threats, the attacker did not let go of the victim. Police found a green bicycle near the trail that belonged to the attacker. Meanwhile, police gathered more evidence and discovered that Aisling had been wearing a fitness tracker while running. The device recorded her body metrics, including speed, distance, and heart rate, helping to clarify the details surrounding her death. The data showed that Aisling started running at 2:51 p.m., and before that, GPS records showed she had parked her bike near the canal. After that, her pulse was around 100 beats per minute, indicating she was in an active phase. She maintained this heart rate until 15:21, during which she ran approximately 3 kilometers. However, after 15:21, her heart rate changed. The Aisling experienced erratic fluctuations, and GPS data showed she was standing still at that time. This was clearly when she was attacked, and by 15:31, her heart had stopped beating. The next step for the police was to review footage from surveillance cameras in the area. Police identified the locations of all recording devices, hoping to find video that would show the suspect, the victim, and the attack itself. Police checked surveillance cameras, focusing on the time frame between 12:25 and 16:05, and were able to identify a man who matched the witness description exactly. It appeared that he was moving randomly along the roads. They determined that this man had appeared long before Aisling's arrival and was using a bicycle identical to the one found at the crime scene. The prime suspect was wearing a black hoodless jacket and sweatpants with stripes down the side, and also had a red logo on his clothes, as Emma described. He had been following a woman in a dark burgundy jacket but was later spotted by her. He had been looking at the victim with interest, but for some unknown reason he quickly fell behind. In footage from another camera, the suspect stops at 1:53 p.m. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out an object. He is seen holding and twisting something in his hand, but the poor quality of the footage makes it difficult to determine what it is. Police suspect he pulled out a knife, which he then used to kill Aisling. A forensic expert concluded that Aisling was killed with a small serrated knife, as the wounds had jagged edges. The man was seen again on surveillance footage at around 2:55 p.m., just as Aisling began training on the trail. Police discovered that the suspect had been wandering around the area, apparently looking for victims, as he occasionally focused on different women. He followed these women at a distance but lost interest until he came across Aisling, whom he decided to attack. Unfortunately, the surveillance cameras did not capture high-quality images that could help identify the criminal. Hours after the attack, a suspect was arrested based on information from witnesses. The suspect, Griot Keegan, is a 39-year-old Romanian immigrant who has lived in Ireland for 23 years and has no criminal record. He matched the person seen on surveillance cameras and found near the scene of the attack. At the police station, he vehemently denied any involvement in the incident. While police were questioning him, police obtained a search warrant and thoroughly searched his house, but found no evidence of his guilt. Griot maintained that there had been a mistake. He provided an alibi that was verified. He had been in a store making a purchase, which was confirmed by his receipt and surveillance footage. After that, he was seen walking along the south bank of the canal while the murder occurred on the north bank. The suspect's fingerprints and DNA samples were collected to compare with skin particles found under the Aisling's nails and on the bicycle, but there was no match. This confirmed that he was not involved in the crime. He was cleared of all suspicions and released. However, for some time, he and his family received threats as local residents still viewed him as a murderer. He was temporarily provided with alternative housing, and the police issued a public statement clarifying that Griot was not connected to the crime. Only after this did the public stop harassing him. This case received wide publicity across the country. The local community was outraged by the attack on Aisling and called on the police to quickly identify and arrest the perpetrators responsible for the tragic death of a talented young woman in broad daylight. For days, police have been trying to piece together clues, and the situation has taken a surprising turn. On the evening following the attack, a 30-year-old man named Josef Puska was admitted to a hospital in Dublin with abdominal injuries. Josef was originally from a small village in Slovakia. He left school at 16 without finishing his education and spent most of his life working as a laborer in the Czech Republic. Although he faced challenges in his lifestyle and at school, Josef was not involved with bad influences, had no criminal record, and was generally seen as a positive individual. In 2015, he moved to Dublin, Ireland, where he and his wife planned to settle permanently. He continued his work as a builder, and during their time there, they welcomed 5 children. Everything seemed to be going well until he suffered a back injury at work. After his recovery, Josef found that he could not return to his previous activities. The back injury was more severe than he had anticipated, leading him to receive disability benefits. He spent a significant amount of time in the hospital, and afterward, he relied on state support. The financial situation was tight, so his wife had to work. Josef had limited proficiency in Irish and struggled with English, which made it difficult for him to communicate with medical staff. When he went to the hospital the day after Aisling's murder, he needed an interpreter for assistance. Thanks to the interpreter, Josef explained that he was in Blanchardstown the previous day, January 12th. He took a taxi there and noticed he was being followed as soon as he arrived, but he did not think much of it since it was daytime. Suddenly, the attackers assaulted him, stabbing him multiple times in the stomach before they ran away. He managed to get home, where he informed his family about the incident and called for an ambulance. Doctors discovered cuts on Josef's hands, signs of defensive wounds. He had multiple stab wounds in his abdomen and received painkillers before a 2-hour surgery. The surgery was completed around 10 o'clock. The doctors concluded that Josef's injuries were from stab wounds inflicted by a small knife, but they were not life-threatening. He remained in the hospital for several days to recover. As part of their protocol, the doctors informed the police about the incident. Officers came to speak with Josef, who was the victim of another attack. Police suspected that the same criminal who attacked Aisling might also be responsible for Josef's injuries. During the conversation, Josef's behavior became increasingly awkward and suspicious. He seemed confused, struggled to recall simple details, and appeared noticeably nervous. Police began to question whether this unemployed man could be connected to Aisling's murder. The next day, the police returned to the hospital to continue questioning and gather more details. This time, Josef gave more specific answers. He explained that he had taken a taxi to the city to meet a woman he had met online. Josef then revealed that he was married with 5 children but did not want his wife to know about his secret encounters. It was later discovered that he had registered on several dating websites and was regularly seeing different women. His wife remained unaware of his affair, as Josef was very careful to keep it a secret. The police asked Josef if he owned a bicycle. He replied that he had a green bicycle that he had used for a long time. However, when they inquired whether he had been riding it on the day of the murder, Josef started to stutter and claimed that his bicycle had been stolen over 2 weeks ago. He had not reported the theft to the police, which raised suspicions. Josef then appeared increasingly anxious, prompting police to leave his hospital room. The police also discovered that he had been near the canal around 6 p.m. that same day. They obtained a warrant to search his apartment, allowing them to collect his clothing and mobile phone for forensic analysis. They called Yosef to inform him of this. Sensing something was amiss, he directly asked the police, through an interpreter, if he was a suspect. The officers reassured him that they were merely trying to clarify the situation and needed to conduct an examination. This conversation occurred over the phone. After the police answered, the Yosef paused for a long moment. Then he turned to the translator and asked him to accurately relay his words to the police officer. Yosef admitted that he had killed the girl by the canal, but he insisted that it was unintentional and an accident. Later the Yosef addressed the police directly. He explained that he was riding his bicycle along a path when he encountered an unfamiliar girl. He had a knife in his hand and accidentally cut her in the neck after losing his balance. She became angry, which frightened Yosef, and he claimed he struck her in the stomach with an object that resembled a knife. He said he tried to remain calm, hoping the girl would settle down. However, she began screaming and threatening him even more, forcing Yosef to defend himself. He then attacked her, repeatedly stabbing her in the neck with his knife. She fought back desperately, but he was able to overpower her. The police were taken aback by his phone confession, finding the story hard to believe. It seemed implausible that Yosef could accidentally stab the victim in the neck before she attacked him. They questioned how Aisling could have had a knife. Yosef expressed fear of retaliation. He believed that if Aisling's friends and relatives learned of the incident, they might harm his children and wife. He asked the police to keep the names of his family members confidential. The police assured Yosef that he would not face prosecution as he would soon be arrested and put on trial. After being discharged from hospital, he was immediately arrested for murder. Afterward, the Yosef changed his story and refused to confess. Despite this, the prosecutor's office viewed him as the only person who could have harmed Aisling that day. They decided to seek the maximum punishment for the murderer. The initial trial date was set for June 2023, but there were several delays, and it wasn't until October 2023 that the prosecution presented the case to the jury. During the trial, prosecutors played surveillance footage showing an attacker who looked like Yosef cycling along a path near the canal for hours before targeting Aisling. His actions were typical of a predator looking for prey. Forensic experts found traces of DNA under Aisling's fingernails, suggesting she fought back and injured her attacker. DNA from tissue samples matched Yosef, and his fingerprints were found on a green bicycle. All witnesses who saw the attacker that day identified him as Yosef. New evidence emerged during the investigation, particularly from one of Yosef's friends, a Slovakian bus driver. On the night of January 12th, while working, he encountered Yosef, who had severe scratches on his stomach. Concerned, the driver offered Yosef a ride home. Yosef mentioned he had gotten into a fight but did not provide details about the incident. During the drive, the bus driver repeatedly questioned Yosef about what had happened, but Yosef avoided giving clear answers and kept holding his stomach, which was bleeding. The driver grew increasingly worried, suspecting that the injuries might be linked to the ethnic cleansing events happening at that time, as there were widespread expressions of hatred against other nationalities. To deflect his friend's questions, Yosef concocted a story about being attacked by a masked man, claiming he couldn't identify the attacker because he hadn't seen his face before and didn't know him. Yosef attempted to portray himself as a hero, claiming he had seen a masked stranger attacking a woman near the canal. Yosef claimed he was stabbed multiple times as he tried to approach the bleeding girl. He became frightened when he realized what had happened and then fled. Despite being suspected of murder, he began to insist that he was actually the savior, having been injured in a fight with the real attacker. However, this new account does not clarify how his DNA was found under Aisling's fingernails or his fingerprints on the green bike he left behind. Yosef's defense argued that his false confession about the attack on Aisling resulted from the painkillers he received in the hospital, which caused him to feel euphoric and led him to speak to himself. Yosef stated that he was under the influence of these drugs when the police began their interrogation. However, doctors who treated Yosef contradicted this claim. They stated that he only received a minimal dose of the medication, meaning it could not have significantly affected him by the time he made his confession. The prosecution highlighted that Yosef had changed his testimony multiple times, making his statements unreliable. However, this posed a challenge for the prosecution because Yosef had no history of violence, especially against women. There were no indications of aggression or cruelty in his behavior, and he had no connection to Aisling, raising questions about his motive for the attack. The prosecution argued that the incident was not a result of personal issues. The trial lasted 3 weeks, after which a jury of 12 members returned their verdict. They deliberated for 3 hours before finding Yosef Puska guilty of the murder of Aisling Murphy. As a result, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The circumstances surrounding Aisling's murder shocked the nation. Just days after the tragedy, protests were held across Ireland in support of the victim's family, and the case shocked the nation. During the investigation, police determined that Yosef had attacked Aisling without any apparent motive. He did not know her. He appeared to be a predator who had been searching for a victim for hours. Unfortunately, Aisling fell victim to a monster. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Natalia Martinez. Natalia Martinez was born in the late 1980s in Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, and she was the youngest daughter in her family. While not much is known about her personality, she had a close relationship with her relatives, especially her older sister, Claudia. Her father was a senior salesman for a large international company that sold household appliances, which allowed the family to live comfortably. Natalia was a cheerful and friendly girl. During her teenage years, she formed a close-knit group of friends who supported one another during difficult times. These friends later described her as sociable and able to connect easily with strangers. After graduating from high school, Natalia began spending more time with her friends. They enjoyed going to various parties and eventually expanded their adventures by visiting the beaches of Uruguay for fun. To celebrate her 19th birthday on January 1st, 2007, Natalia and her friends planned a trip to La Paloma, a small resort town, where they stayed for 2 weeks. On January 16th, they traveled to a nearby resort in the city of Reles, where Natalia was delighted to meet her parents and sister, who were there for a 4-day vacation. The Natalia family had a wonderful time enjoying beach activities and were well known in the town, as they frequently visited. They often returned to the same places, making it feel like a second home. On January 18th, Natalia and her sister Claudia decided to drive to Punta del Este, another tourist town less than an hour away from Reles. They planned to stop at a popular local spa located about halfway between the two towns in the Serra San Antonio area. After their beauty treatment, the girls planned to go to a disco with 3 of Natalia's friends. However, as the evening approached, Claudia felt very tired and decided to go home to their parents. Despite this, 19-year-old Natalia Martinez was determined to stick to her plans. She wanted to enjoy herself, so she went with her friends to a popular party at the local nightclub, La Erin, Canada, where they stayed until around 5 a.m. As morning approached, the girls decided to leave the party and head home. At that time, Natalia was talking with a man named Leonardo Rockovin, an old acquaintance who owned a bookstore. They stopped near the exit and continued their conversation. However, Natalia became so engrossed in her discussion with Leonardo that her friends decided to go outside and get into the car they had arrived in, planning to head home together. The girls got tired and got into the car. One of them decided to check on Natalia, but when they returned to the nightclub, they found that Natalia and Leonardo were gone. The friends realized that Natalia could not have left alone or with anyone else without letting them know. Since they did not see her leave, they began to worry. They went up to the second floor, out of the bar, and saw Leonardo's BMW in the parking lot. The owner was inside the car, and because the windows were tinted, Rosalia and Silva could not see if anyone was in the passenger seat. However, they did notice some movement inside the car. The girls called out to Leonardo to ask about Natalia. He said he was in the car with a friend and mentioned that he had spoken to Natalia briefly before they parted ways. He claimed he had no idea what happened to her afterward or why she didn't return to her friends. The girls assumed Natalia had gone home, so they got into the car and drove to her friends' relatives, who were at the police station, just a 10-minute drive from the club. Rosalia and Silva stopped near the house and hunked to get Claudia's attention, trying not to wake the entire family. However, no one responded, so they returned to the club where they last saw Natalia. The girls continued to search for their friend for about 2 hours, but their efforts were unsuccessful. No one knew where she had gone. Around 8 a.m., Silva returned home, exhausted and very worried about her missing friend. Worried about her friend's safety, she decided to tell her parents everything that had happened. She feared something bad might have happened to her friend. Her parents tried to reassure her, telling her to rest and that her friend was probably already home. So, she went to bed. Yet, when she woke up at 11 a.m. that same day, her concerns grew stronger. The entire Natalia family started searching for she. They quickly got involved, and her friends went to the club together to find out what happened. Unfortunately, they were still unsuccessful. The club was closed, and no one had any helpful information. They searched the surrounding area for clues but found nothing. Around 5 p.m., Natalia's family and friends arrived at the police station. Maldonado police investigators received several photos, including one of all the girls relaxing at a club that evening. This helped them understand what the missing girl was wearing so they could come up with a description for the search. The police took their statements seriously and began investigating. Initially, the family said that Natalia had been at a party where she may have had too much to drink and left with someone. However, Rosalia and Silva insisted that Natalia had not consumed any alcohol that night, as she often denied. They also dismissed the police's suspicions that they had used illegal drugs. Police began a search operation. They first went to the location where Natalia was last seen. The club was open, but there were no surveillance cameras at the time. Police spoke to club employees and learned that a group of 3 young men sitting at a nearby table had been trying to approach the women throughout the evening. Natalia's friends confirmed that the men had been harassing them. Despite this information, police ignored the group of young men and instead focused on the acquaintance with whom Natalia had been talking before she disappeared. It was no surprise that Leonardo immediately became the prime suspect, since he was the last person to see Natalia. However, all of Leonardo's acquaintances described him as a kind and calm person who had never shown any signs of cruelty before and was incapable of harming anyone. He was a young businessman. That night, his girlfriend waited for him in the car while he was talking to Natalia. After that, he said goodbye to Natalia and returned to the car with his girlfriend. From the car, he saw Natalia go down the stairs and go out onto the porch. From that moment on, Leonardo was distracted by his conversation with his girlfriend and did not see Natalia again. However, he was not worried about her, since he did not notice anything suspicious around. No one was screaming or making noise. Despite the police's suspicions, Leonardo insisted he had nothing to do with Natalia's disappearance. However, the police did not trust him. They needed to conduct a thorough examination of the BMW he drove away in after the party. Several witnesses reported seeing a similar car in various locations around the city, including near a forest on the outskirts. One man claimed he spotted a couple having sex in a car that matched the description on the night she went missing, near a lake by the woods. Police obtained a search warrant for Leonardo's car. During the initial inspection, they found a long, dark hair on the floor of the BMW and sent it for analysis. However, it did not match Natalia, it belonged to someone else. The interior of the car showed no signs of suspicious activity, no blood, or evidence of a struggle. Police speculated that Leonardo had cleaned the car shortly after Natalia Martinez disappeared, which would explain the clean condition of the car. Police used this detail as part of the evidence against Leonardo. However, they still lacked the evidence to arrest him. On January 22, a passerby driving on the outskirts of Polis discovered several items on the roadside. Among them were a woman's handbag containing a wallet and a pair of women's shoes. The most crucial piece of evidence was linked to Natalia Martinez, a case that was currently receiving significant media attention. Recognizing the situation, the witness promptly contacted the police. Unfortunately, the media coverage also led to the spread of various rumors, which Natalia's family had to repeatedly deny. One such rumor suggested that Natalia was involved with drug dealers, implying that she had become a victim of criminal activities. However, Natalia's father publicly refuted these claims in an official television statement. Despite the situation, rumors continued to spread. Some claimed to have witnessed her being attacked or even murdered. Instead of receiving assistance from the media, police found themselves overwhelmed by numerous false testimonies each day that needed to be verified, complicating the investigation. Meanwhile, the media eagerly reported even the most outrageous theories. The story was considered compelling and attracted many readers, causing journalists to add fuel to the fire of chaos surrounding the case. The rumors about the missing girl were leveraged to boost newspaper sales. Natalia's family endured immense pain following her disappearance. A large-scale search operation was organized, involving many police officers, friends, family members, and hundreds of volunteers. It was quickly determined that there was no evidence of the girl near the nightclub, prompting the search to extend into more distant areas of Uruguay. Ultimately, the entire coast was thoroughly searched. Most of the search operations took place on land, using service dogs, and later involving military and civilian aircraft. The City Fire Brigade also participated in the search and requested that the sewer systems be inspected. However, no traces of Natalia were found there either. By this point, law enforcement had largely concluded that Natalia was deceased, as the likelihood of finding her alive was very low. The critical window for finding missing persons is usually 48 hours. A significant finding occurred when a bone was discovered on the Grande Plateau, but tests revealed it was not human. Although the search had stalled and no new leads had emerged, Natalia's relatives continued their efforts. They remained hopeful that she was alive and being held against her will. In 2000, a female body was discovered in the forest near Lake Yolo. The body was in poor condition and was sent for examination to determine the identity of the deceased. This location was several kilometers from the club where Natalia was last seen, and the clothing found on the body led police to suspect it might belong to the missing Natalia Martinez. After the discovery of the body, police remembered a couple who had been seen having sex in a car near the forest, which drew attention to that area. The forensic expert who performed the autopsy struggled to gather important information because the body was in an advanced state of decomposition. To ensure a thorough examination, 5 forensic experts were called in. They determined that the body belonged to Natalia Martinez. Their overall assessments suggested that she likely did not die of natural causes, as there were faint signs of strangulation on her neck. Although they ruled out poisoning from substances or alcohol, they could not find evidence of physical or sexual violence due to the body's condition. It was noteworthy that the victim was found tied with nylon thread, but it remained unclear whether this occurred before or after her death. Several months later, while the investigation continued, an unexpected development arose. the man who had found her belongings on the roadside was discovered dead at the bottom of a cliff near his home. His name was initially kept confidential. Initially, it appeared that the man had voluntarily chosen to end his life. However, all his relatives insisted that he would never do such a thing. He was a deeply religious man, cherished his life, and loved his family. An autopsy revealed that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, sustained long before the fall from the cliff, suggesting he had been thrown off. This led police to believe the two cases were linked. But more evidence was needed. The next tragic event involved Natalia's father, Ever Martinez. He had fallen into a deep depression after his daughter's death and the damaging rumors that were circulating about their family. He ended his life at home by shooting himself in the head. His body was discovered by his daughter Claudia and his wife. The police closed the case after confirming that he had acted alone, a conclusion that the family accepted. For a long time, police struggled to make progress in the investigation into Natalia's murder. However, new information emerged from text messages exchanged with a friend just days before Natalia's death. In these conversations, Natalia mentioned a man she had recently met online. It was later discovered that he was one of the men who had been at the nightclub on the day Natalia went missing. These three young men were sitting at a nearby table, and several witnesses had pointed them out from the beginning of the investigation, but this information was overlooked. Police identified all three suspects, who were slightly older than Natalia. After interviewing them, the police became even more suspicious of their involvement, as the men contradicted each other in their statements about where they were and what they did during the night and morning of that tragic day. After this, the police interviewed a witness whose identity was kept confidential for her safety. She was the girlfriend of one of the men who had been arrested. Her testimony revealed that a young man in the group, Rodrigo Verghese, was involved in Natalia's murder. At the time, he was 25 years old, and police later stated that he had previously provided false statements. During the interrogation, police recorded phone conversations that implicated the Rodrigo main suspect. They collected DNA samples from him, but these were not helpful for the investigation due to the advanced decomposition of the remains. After that, the police reached out to the friends and relatives of the Rodrigo. A young man was called to testify on June 8, 2010, along with his friends who had been at a nightclub on the night of Natalia's murder. They all claimed they had no involvement in the incident. They stated that after spending the night at the club, they hired a sex worker to join them in their continued festivities. However, they denied any connection to Natalia. Rodrigo, the prime suspect, denied spending time with the murdered woman and claimed he did not know her. However, messages from the girl revealed that they had spoken online and planned to meet at a party, suggesting that Rodrigo had lied. Initial questioning did not turn up any clues, but a day later, police spoke to the young people again in the hope of getting a confession. This time, Rodrigo confessed. He explained that he had met Natalia online and after chatting for a while, they decided to meet at a club. Unfortunately, their conversation did not go well, and as dawn approached, he suggested they go to another nearby nightclub. Rodrigo misled her. He wanted to be alone with her. During this time, he began to harass her, according to his confession. When she rejected his advances, he seemed to accept it. However, Natalia then suffered an asthma attack, which led to convulsions and ultimately her death, as she did not have her inhaler or any medication with her. Rodrigo was confused and unable to help her. He stated that he panicked during her attack and didn't know what to do, especially when she stopped showing signs of life in his car. After the party, he planned to return to his family's farm, a short distance from the city. However, after Natalia's death, he decided to dispose of her body to avoid any further repercussions. He headed for the woods, thinking it would be a good place to hide her. There, he tied Natalia up, dragged her deeper into the woods, and covered her body with branches. But this was only part of the story. A witness walking along the beach claimed to have seen a couple having sex, and Natalia's body showed signs of strangulation. It seems that Rodrigo neglected to mention that he had strangled and raped her at the same time. Police were later able to confirm that Rodrigo's other friends were not involved in the incident, so they were released shortly after Rodrigo confessed. Rodrigo was formally charged with murder and taken into custody. After the confession, it appeared that the prosecutor's office would easily prove the Rodrigo's guilt. However, in mid-2010, as preliminary hearings began, Rodrigo Vergés recanted his confession. He claimed he admitted to the murder under police pressure and insisted he did not commit the crime. This assertion seemed unlikely because his confession included numerous details only the actual killer would know, including the precise location where the girl's body was found. Still, Rodrigo maintained his innocence. Despite the evidence against him, his defense team supported his statement and sought to demonstrate that Rodrigo was not at the club that night. They presented mobile phone data and a statement from his employer confirming that he had been working his usual evening shift that day. The next day, he attended a friend's wedding, and no one noticed anything unusual about his behavior. On September 2, 2010, Leonardo Roccovan, the bookstore owner who was initially the main suspect in the investigation, was called as a key witness for the prosecution. Leonardo testified that during a conversation, he had an argument with a young man. Leonardo identified the young man as Rodrigo. This indicated that Rodrigo was definitely at the nightclub and not at work. Natalia's friends also confirmed that he was at the nightclub that night. Forensic experts, working with the prosecution, provided insights based on the autopsy results. They noted that, due to the typical symptoms of asthma, the girl could not have died from an asthma attack so quickly. While she did experience an asthma attack, it could not have occurred instantaneously, it took several hours. Additionally, there were signs of strangulation on the victim's neck, which was likely the cause of death. Unfortunately, the experts could not provide further details about the victim's injuries. From late August to mid-September 2010, the prosecution successfully constructed a narrative of the crime, leading to Rodrigo Vergés being found guilty of Natalia Martinez's murder. He received a 9-year prison sentence. However, in February 2011, Rodrigo's lawyer submitted an appeal, claiming that the court's ruling was incorrect and that the prosecution was biased. The lawyer argued that they failed to present a witness to the kidnapping or murder, nor did they provide any compelling direct evidence. Natalia's family expressed disappointment, saying that the criminal received a lighter sentence than the family had expected. Disappointed by this leniency, Natalia's relatives filed a civil lawsuit against Rodrigo Vergés for causing harm to Natalia's family, holding him responsible for her father's death. Initially, they mentioned that Rodrigo should pay $15 in damages. However, after further discussion, both parties agreed to increase the amount of damages to $7,000. The court rejected the request for a longer sentence. On October 27, 2014, the lawyer achieved his goal when Rodrigo, 29, was pardoned after serving only 4 years and 2 months in prison. His release was largely due to his good behavior while in custody. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lynette Vonda Pontius. Lynette Pontius was born in Battle Creek, Michigan, USA. She was the youngest child in her family, with 2 brothers who were 2 and 3 years older than her. Lynette is very active, sociable and cheerful, so she is always popular in every group of friends. She very also attractive and caught the attention of the opposite sex. She never lacked boyfriends and led a somewhat carefree lifestyle. As a result, Lynette became pregnant and had to leave school in the 9th grade. When Lynette turned 16, she gave birth to her first child. She lived with the child's father for a while, but they eventually broke up. He showed no interest in Lynette or the baby, he disappeared and ignored all to contact him. Lynette's situation was difficult. She struggled to find a suitable job so that she could conveniently take care of her newborn child, and no one wanted to hire Lynette, a teenage mother. Eventually, Lynette found work at a fast food restaurant. To make ends meet, she continued to build relationships. She was interested in several guys in her social circle until she met Martin, a customer at the restaurant, who was 2 years older than her. Martin was from the same city as Lynette's. After high school, he took a part-time job at a private company owned by a married couple who made fences. He wasn't interested in pursuing higher education, so he spent his free time with friends. In 1999, Martin and Lynette started dating after being introduced by a mutual friend. Despite being somewhat bold, Martin was overall a likable person and always keeps a positive attitude. Lynette's relatives believe that he will be able to guide her in the right direction. However, there were rumors that Martin struggled with an addiction to mild substances. Martin and Lynette dated for less than a year, but during that time, he became part of Lynette's family. Her parents welcomed him with open arms, and he came and went from their home freely. However, love that blooms quickly also fades easily. Later, Martin admitted that Lynette was manipulative and accepted no disagreement from others. They had regular conflicts, which led to their breakup. It seemed like nothing special had happened, just two young people who didn't get along. But a few weeks after the breakup, everything changed when Lynette called Martin and told him she was pregnant. Initially, Martin doubted that the child was his, but Lynette insisted it was. A greater surprise came when Lynette was arrested for identity theft, cashing other people's checks, and several other minor scams. Her explanation was that she had committed these crimes out of desperation, as she had no other means of supporting her children. Despite her, Lynette faced the possibility of prison. To protect their first child from ending up in an orphanage, Martin chose to become the boy's legal guardian. He felt responsible for this child and wanted to provide as much support as possible. Martin was a thoughtful father who put his children's needs first. After Lynette's release from prison in 2005, he and Lynette came to a mutual agreement. Martin allowed the children to maintain contact with their mother, and during her imprisonment, he frequently took them to visit her for several hours. Martin made sure the kids had regular, extended visits with Lynette during her imprisonment. Martin has proven himself to be a thoughtful father. He took the children hiking and spent all his free time with them. Even after Lynette's release, life continued smoothly for the family. Martin and Lynette, who were once a couple, agreed on custody arrangements that allowed Lynette to have regular visits with their child. Lynette took custody of their older child. Meanwhile, she started dating a new man and soon became pregnant with her third child. She then officially published her relationship with the father of her unborn child. During this time, Martin had to leave Battle Creek and move to Kalamazoo. In Kalamazoo, he began a relationship with a new girl, Elizabeth, who also had a child. Martin and Lynette grew apart, but they remained connected through their daughter. At first, everything in the family seemed fine. However, Lynette became concerned as the distance between her and her daughter grew. Matters became more complicated in February 2007, when Martin Campbell was attacked at his girlfriend Elizabeth's house. During the attack, he was shot once in the leg and once in the shoulder. As Martin attempted to flee, he collapsed from the pain and shock. The attacker then pointed the gun at Martin's head and pulled the trigger twice. The attacker intended to empty the entire magazine into Martin. However, after 2 shots to the head, the weapon jammed. Determined to kill Martin, the criminal furiously began to hit his on the head with the pistol. He then left the bleeding Martin on the floor and calmly walked away. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation and spoke with a witness. Elizabeth provided the first clues about the criminal. Although he wore a mask, she noticed that he appeared much older, as she saw a mustache with gray hairs peeking through. The killer's behavior was clear. He didn't steal anything or attack Elizabeth. His target was Martin. This was evident from the brutality of the attack, which left no chance for Martin's survival. At that time, doctors were trying to save Martin's life. Despite suffering severe head and face injuries, he survived, which was nothing short of a miracle. He was fortunate because the gun jammed. Even a shot to the head could have been fatal. The first bullet hit his shoulder and narrowly missed a major artery. Had it been severed, Martin would have bled to death before the ambulance arrived. Martin's miraculous survival was also crucial for the investigation, as it allowed detectives to get information directly from him. Once his condition stabilized, detectives visited him in the hospital to talk. Martin and Elizabeth were certain that the attempted murder was not a random. This was the second attempt on his life that he had survived. In late February, just days before the shooting, Elizabeth reported an attempted murder while she was returning from the store. As she drove into the garage, a stranger crashed into her car's trunk, blocking her vehicle and the garage door, preventing it from closing. She got out and saw a black SUV, from which a weapon man emerged. The man pointed a gun at Elizabeth's head and asked where Martin was. However, she remained calm and told him that Martin was not home. This was a lie, as she knew Martin was playing with the children in the backyard. She lied to protect their lives. Her tactic worked. The man believed her and left. Before leaving, he mentioned that Martin owed him a large sum of money, and he was there to collect the debt, warning that he would not leave them alone. At that time, Elizabeth contacted the police and provided a detailed description of the man and his car. Additionally, a neighbor witnessed the skirmish, sensed something was wrong, and noted the car's license plate. However, the police discovered that the car was reported stolen and registered in another state, which did not help the investigation. It seemed the search for the criminal had reached a dead end. Nevertheless, a similar car was found a few blocks from the attack site in an apartment complex parking lot. The police attempted to track down the driver of the black SUV but were unsuccessful. The day before the unexpected attack, a masked man broke into Martin and Elizabeth's house and shot Martin at close range. Martin was certain that the killer had been sent by his ex, Lynette Pontius. She was the only person with a motive against he. Her criminal record raised suspicions, as she had previously spent 2 years in prison for financial crimes, including fraud and extortion. However, initially after her release, there were no issues, and Martin did not restrict her communication with their child. Lynette quickly begins to control things and she wants more. She sought to control the process of raising her children and would behave brutal when she was dissatisfied with something. This led to constant conflicts. As a result, Martin decided to reduce the time his daughter spent with her biological mother, Lynette, which further angered she. Finally, she went to court to dispute Martin's custody. However, she faced an obstacle due to her previous convictions, which worked against her, giving Martin a strong chance of winning. This could have been the last straw, making her hate him more and more. Investigators had several questions, particularly about why Lynette had resorted to such actions. Until now, no one had ever observed any aggressive behavior in Lynette. All her relatives and friends knew her as a kind and cheerful person. Additionally, it was clear that the attacker was an older man on both occasions, suggesting that Lynette might truly be innocent. To find answers, the detectives decided to directly contact the main suspect in organizing the assassination attempt. They were surprised to discover that Lynette had left her hometown the day after the shooting at the house Martin. Elizabeth found it suspicious to exclude Lynette from the suspect list. However, finding and detaining Lynette was not easy. It was discovered that she was trying to flee the country, and a nationwide search was launched to capture her. During this time, detectives received another lead. It was revealed that Martin may owe large sums of money from criminal organizations. Some of Martin's friends mentioned that he had been in debt for a long time. Martin used to consume soft substances and smoke. He admitted this to the police but insisted that those days were behind him. Martin claimed that he only used these substances during his meet with Lynette and had quit his bad habits long ago. Before Lynette was caught, a prisoner from the local jail informed the police that Lynette had approached him some time before the attack, offering money to carry out an attack Martin. Lynette was searching for a mercenary to kill Martin. She devised a cunning plan. Accordingly, the killer must win Martin's trust, and after a while, get him drunk or full of mild narcotics to ensure unconsciousness. Afterward, the hired killer would eliminate Martin. Lynette believed it would be best to make it look like an accident. Overall, she didn't care about the method, as long as Martin dies, so that she can gain custody of their daughter. Later, the police gathered evidence from various individuals who reported receiving similar requests and provocations from Lynette. Many people claimed that she had tried to hire them as mercenaries, but none of them were actual shooters, and they all declined the offer. Fortunately, the police quickly identified the killer, who was likely the person who agreed to help Lynette. This suspect was a 59-year-old man named Joseph Lover, who was romantically involved with Lynette. He had a history of involvement in numerous serious crimes. Joseph fit the description of the attacker and was capable of carrying out such a bold attack in broad daylight. The brutal massacre aligned with the style of Joseph, a man who had spent most of his life in prison. However, when the police attempted to locate him, they discovered that he had left the city around the same time Lynette disappeared. It is likely that they fled together. Lynette and Joseph managed to stay hidden until February 13, 2007, when they were discovered near the Mexico-US border. They had been planning to escape to another country to avoid facing justice. However, Lynette realized she needed to retrieve some important documents she had left behind in Mexico and had to return for them. Unfortunately for them, the police were already there waiting to capture them. 5 days later, they were taken into custody, which was a great relief for Martin, who was worried about another attack. Although he was pleased with the arrest, the investigation struggled to communicate with the criminals. Surprisingly, Joseph was very cooperative with the detectives. He admitted he was driving a stolen car and having a pistol, hoping for a reduced sentence. However, he consistently denied being involved in the attack and attempted murder of Martin. Lynette partially backed up his claims, stating she had hired a mercenary to confront Martin. Her intention, she said, was not to kill him but to scare him into relinquishing custody of their daughter. Being separated from her daughter made Lynette extremely miserable. She claimed that Martin did not allow her to see her daughter. Additionally, she alleged that she found evidence of Martin abusing her daughter. Lynette accused Martin of substance abuse and domestic violence. She also shared details about their relationship, stating that Martin had repeatedly beaten her, which led to their breakup. Lynette did not see him as a benefactor, said that he took advantage of her difficult circumstances when their daughter was born. He allegedly forced her to sign documents and formalize guardianship while she was helpless in prison. She believes Martin acted shamelessly in taking advantage of her situation. The interrogations of the two suspects, Lynette and Joseph, happened at the same time, but in different rooms to compare their stories. The investigators, having received information from Lynette, decided to confront Joseph. Initially, Joseph refused to tell the truth. However, once he learned that Lynette the crime was trying to turn him in to the police, Joseph changed his story. He claimed that Lynette had first approached him in 2007 with a request to kill Martin. Lynette didn't care how Martin died, she just wanted him gone forever. The plan was for Martin to disappear without any witnesses, and his body would be disposed of discreetly. But Lynette didn't expect Joseph to act in a dramatic manner. Joseph's story matched with what the police already knew. During the investigation, the police chose to disclose this information to observe Lynette's response. Lynette, however, cleverly refused to give a statement and asked for a lawyer. Prosecutors claimed that Lynette's main motive was her dissatisfaction with the decisions regarding her child's upbringing and restrictions on communicating with him. She tried to challenge custody in court but was unsuccessful. After that, Lynette didn't stop and decided to hire a hitman. Joseph Lover, 51 years old, was also charged with attempted murder. This man admitted his guilt and provided the police with a detailed report. The trial was full of surprises, starting when Joseph unexpectedly changed his earlier testimony during the hearing. He retracted his previous statements and took full responsibility for the incident, claiming that Lynette was not involved and that he was solely responsible for planning and executing the assassination attempt. It seemed like Joseph loved Lynette so much that he wanted to protect her. However, before the next stage of the hearing, Joseph shocked everyone again by reverting to his original story, asserting that Lynette had hired him as a hitman. To obtain these confessions the prosecution suggested a plea deal. In this case, the prosecutor's office re-entered the proceedings, aiming to demonstrate that Lynette had a justified motive. Lynette clearly disliked Martin due to dissatisfaction with custody arrangements. However, the prosecutor's office relied on very limited evidence. In reality, there was nothing concrete to directly implicate Lynette in the crime. There were no phone records or messages, and Joseph, the sole witness, was unreliable, which weakened the prosecution's position. Lynette's lawyer effectively used these weaknesses to persuade the jury of her innocence. On October 3rd of that year, Joseph confirmed to the jury that Lynette was the mastermind behind the plan to kill Martin. He confirmed that she had formulated the whole plan. However, his numerous contradictions and retractions during the testimony made the jury question his credibility. The defense then made a surprising move. According to Lynette, Martin was an abusive father who often physically harmed his daughter. She presented photos showing bruises on the child's arms and back as evidence. In response, Martin's family defended him by disputing these accusations. They suggested the photos only showed minor abrasions that a child might get accidentally, arguing they did not resemble signs of abuse. They even implied that Lynette herself might have caused the bruises. Despite the defenses put forward by Martin's relatives, Lynette successfully raised doubts in the jury's minds, she portraying herself as a victim. This thing aimed to make Martin's murder seem like an act of kindness in protection of the child. In the end, the lawyers portrayed her accomplice, Joseph, as a true hero. They argued that Joseph was protecting Lynette and her daughter. Lynette did not ask for Martin to be killed, she only wanted to scare him. However, Joseph, a seasoned criminal, believed he was rescuing the girl from cruelty and tyranny, which led him to kill Martin. Additionally, the defense argued that Lynette could not have planned the murder herself, because if that had happened, she would likely have faced life in prison. This was inconsistent with the image of a loving, caring mother seeking custody of her child. Now, the jury had to make a decision in this complicated case. On October 5, 2007, after lengthy discussions, the jury announced the verdict in this case. Lynette was found guilty of orchestrating the attack. Her extravagant lifestyle and criminal record worked against her. The jury didn't believe the lawyer who portrayed Martin as an abuser involved in domestic violence against the child. In fact, there was no evidence to support these claims. Lynette's family was shocked by the jury's verdict. Initially, Lynette was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 50 years, but the sentence was later changed. However, the judge considered Lynette to be a socially dangerous person. He sincerely expressed his hope that no parole board would ever decide to release the woman. Lynette remains in the Huron Correctional Facility for Women. She has served enough of her sentence to apply for parole and has submitted a petition. Lynette is hopeful about being released soon, but no decision has been made yet. Martin's family hoped she will never be released. Her accomplice, Joseph, received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Tracy Hallett and J.B. Beasley. J.B. Beasley was born on July 31, 1981, in Troy, Alabama, to Cheryl and Hilton Lanier J.B. After her parents divorced in 1984, J.B. moved to Dothan with her mother. Her mother later married Joey Begun, who became J.B.'s loving stepfather, and she and her 4 sisters grew up in a house in Dothan. She was an outgoing girl who enjoyed a variety of activities, including cheerleading, dance lessons, playing the piano, and swimming. J.B. and her sisters also modeled for several companies. During high school, she met Tracy Hallett, with whom she quickly formed a close friendship. Tracy was born on March 3, 1982, to Carolyn and Robert Hallett, a police officer with the Dothan Police Department. Her life took a dramatic turn when her father died when Tracy was 5 years old. Her mother then married Mike Roberts, who raised Tracy with her mother. Unlike her friend J.B., Tracy was shy but always put others before herself. As the eldest in the family, she took her responsibilities very seriously, especially when it came to her 2 younger brothers. Tracy attended Northview High School, excelling in her studies and participating in extracurricular activities as a cheerleader, often with J.B. As the 2 girls began to enter adulthood, they had no idea of the tragic fate that awaited them. On July 31, 1999, J.B. and Tracy set off from Dothan in J.B.'s 1993 Mazda 929 to attend a birthday party in Headland, a town just a few miles north. However, unfamiliar with the roads, the 2 young women soon found themselves in trouble. Just minutes after starting their journey from home, they became lost. At approximately 10:30 p.m., J.B. and Tracy stopped at a BP gas station in Headland to ask for directions. The gas station was located near the intersection of routes 173 and 431. Using the pay phone at the gas station, they called their friends to get a better idea of how to get to the party. However, after driving on, J.B. and Tracy found themselves in Ozark, Alabama, about 24 miles northwest of Headland, instead of their intended destination. Still confused about the directions, the girls stopped at the Big Little store at 11:30 p.m. Although the store was closed, they used the pay phone to make another call. This time, Tracy called her mother to tell them they were lost, in Ozark, and planning to return home. A woman, Marilyn Merritt, and her daughters then stopped at a gas station to buy a soda. Tracy and J.B. approached them and asked for directions to Dothan. Marilyn explained the route as best she could, and the girls seemed to understand. She found the girls polite and well-mannered and noted that their car was clean. Marilyn recalled that the girls left the parking lot and turned right, as she had instructed. However, at that time, J.B. and Tracy had not returned home. The next morning, August 1, 1999, around 8 a.m., Tracy's mother contacted the police to report her daughter missing. Police soon discovered their first clue regarding the girl's disappearance. After Tracy was reported missing, police found J.B.'s car on Herring Avenue in Ozark. What was unusual about the discovery was that the car's gas tank, which had been full the day before, was now nearly empty. The car showed signs of having been driven in muddy conditions, but the doors had been locked, although the driver's side window was partially rolled down. There was no evidence of forced entry. Inside, police found J.B.'s driver's license on the dashboard, as well as the girls' wallets, which still contained cash. However, the car keys were missing, and neither Tracy nor J.B. were found. A fingerprint on the locked trunk lid led police to believe something was seriously wrong. As they surveyed the scene, they suspected the trunk might contain vital clues but were hampered by the lack of a key. However, after 6 hours of investigation, they found an interior latch that allowed them to open the trunk without a key. When police opened the trunk, they made a horrifying discovery: the bodies of 2 girls inside. Both victims were fully clothed, but their pants were soiled from the waist down. Each had been shot once in the head. An autopsy revealed that Tracy had been shot in the temple, while JB had been shot in the right cheek. Tracy's body also showed a 9mm shell casing in her leg, scratches on her arm, and spikes stuck in her jeans. JB's clothes, especially her new shoes, were muddy and dirty. Police discovered that the 2 girls had likely been shot inside the trunk, although initial signs suggested an execution-style killing. After notifying their families of the discovery, an official murder investigation was launched. Police found the girls' wallets, jewelry, money, and credit cards still in the car, indicating that this was not a robbery. Autopsies revealed no alcohol or drugs in the victims' systems. Additionally, the autopsies confirmed that neither girl had been sexually assaulted before her death, ruling out a sexual motive. 2 months after Tracy and JB's murders, the State Crime Lab released a report revealing the presence of unidentified semen on JB's clothing and skin. Despite this new evidence, the fingerprints found on the trunk lid remained a mystery, as there was no match in the database. With no clear leads, the investigation stalled. As news of the girls' deaths spread rapidly, police still had few leads to identify a suspect. A reward was also offered to try to gather information related to the murders, but no new leads were discovered. However, police soon received an unexpected breakthrough in the case. A month after the discovery of JB and Tracy's bodies, Johnny William Barentine, 28, a longtime resident of Ozark, came forward to the local police department on September 1st. Johnny claimed to have witnessed the girls' murders. He testified that on the night of the murders, he had gone out to buy milk for his 2-year-old son around the time Tracy called from the Big Little Store pay phone. At 1 a.m., Johnny returned home visibly upset and initially told his wife that he had been hit by a black truck near Herring Road. However, during a 4-hour interview with Ozark police, Johnny gave 6 different accounts of what he knew. He initially told Ozark Police Chief Tony R. Spivey that he saw a black truck speeding away from the area where the girls' bodies were discovered. Unfortunately, his story continued to change and contradict throughout the interviews. Johnny initially claimed that he picked up a tattooed stranger and drove to the Big Little Store. He later said that the stranger got into a car with 2 girls, whom he recognized as the 2 girls who were later found dead. Johnny said that the group drove to Herring Avenue, where the stranger forced the girls out of the car, leading to a struggle as the girls tried to escape. According to Johnny's statement, after witnessing a confrontation, he saw something in the stranger's hand just before hearing 2 gunshots. Johnny then drove the stranger away from the scene before returning home. However, in a conflicting version of events, Johnny admitted to police that he actually knew the stranger he picked up, identifying him as a neighbor who lived nearby. Notably, Johnny's home was less than a mile from where police discovered the victims' bodies. Johnny's story was not convincing to police, and he became the prime suspect in the murders of JB and Tracy. As a result, Ozark police quickly arrested him and charged him with 2 counts of attempted murder. However, several issues with his testimony raised suspicions. Notably, Johnny did not mention any sexual activity that would explain the presence of semen on JB's clothes and body. Additionally, the neighbor he accused had a solid alibi for the time. Johnny initially confessed to making up the entire story to collect the reward money. Despite his admission, the police believed they had the right suspect. At a preliminary hearing on September 21st, Alabama Bureau of Investigation Special Agent Charles Huggins testified that Johnny accurately described the victim's clothing and other relevant details, indicating that he was indeed present at the crime scene. Then, at a bail hearing on October 18th, Johnny gave another testimony. He proclaimed his innocence, saying that he never picked up a man with a tattoo or witnessed anything on the night of the murder. According to Johnny, he went to the store around 11 p.m. to buy milk for his son and then made up the story to get a reward. The judge denied him bail and he was sent back to the Dale County Jail in Ozark. Throughout this time, Johnny's family members remained supportive of him. They gave interviews to the media, expressing their belief in his innocence and stating that he was incapable of harming anyone. Johnny's attorney, Bill Kimmons, argued that his client had no involvement in the murders of Tracy and J.B., emphasizing that the 4-hour interrogation had affected Johnny, who was trapped in his own false confession. Johnny's defense also pointed out that he had only completed 7th grade and part of 8th grade. He said his client was in special education, suggesting he was incapable of planning the heinous crime. After further investigation, it was discovered that Johnny's DNA did not match the semen found on the victim's body and clothing. As a result, he was released from prison on December 17, 1999. In January 2000, a Dale County grand jury chose not to indict Johnny, officially clearing him of any suspects in the murders of Tracy and J.B. This development led to a setback in the investigation, with criticism directed at the police methods used and doubts raised about the Ozark Police's ability to handle the case. However, police continued to focus on other potential suspects. During the investigation, a man from Michigan was identified as the prime suspect. He had attended a party the night of the murders near the area and JB's car was later found. The man had left town shortly after the murders, raising suspicion. Police interviewed him 3 times in Michigan but were unable to provide a clear explanation for the 3 to 4-hour gap in his alibi for the night of the murder. However, these statements were never made public by police. The case against him was eventually dropped after DNA evidence proved his innocence. Another key lead police are investigating is the driver of a small white pickup truck that was spotted at the Big Little store. Security footage captured the truck at the gas station when JB and Tracy stopped to call Tracy's mother from a payphone. The video quality was poor and did not show the driver or anyone getting in or out of the truck. It was impossible to follow a digital trail, as there was no record of gas being purchased at the gas station at the time. After releasing photos of the truck to the media, police asked the public for information, but as leads went cold, the driver and truck were never found. The last potential lead was a Mississippi man who had been extradited to Ozark from Jones County on an unrelated charge of possession of drug paraphernalia. The man had stayed with relatives in Ozark for a short time before leaving town 2 days after the murder, prompting police to question him. However, the questioning yielded no significant information and, without evidence, they were forced to release him. A woman contacted police in March 2000, reporting that she had heard screaming and 2 gunshots on the night of July 31, 1999, near Highway 123 South, just inside the city limits. When asked about her delayed report, she explained that she feared being implicated. Police searched the area thoroughly based on her description and found a 9mm bullet, the same caliber used in the murders of Tracy and J.B. However, the make of the bullet did not match the brand of the shell casing found on Tracy's body. Furthermore, the bullet had no markings that could be used to forensically compare it to other evidence in the case. Unfortunately, this lead ended up being another dead end for the police. Several leads in the J.B. and Tracy case eventually ran into dead ends, but police were determined to find a DNA match. As J.B. and Tracy's grieving families tried to move on with their lives, the case went cold. Years later, however, a dramatic development reignited the investigation. A major breakthrough came in 2015 when Rena, an auxiliary Ozark police officer, came forward and publicly accused an Ozark police officer of killing J.B. and Tracy and others of covering up the incident. Rena made several serious allegations related to a 1999 incident in Ozark. According to her, a police officer stopped a man named JB on the night of July 31, 1999, looking for cassette tapes containing recordings of conversations. These tapes allegedly implicated Ozark police officers in a cocaine distribution and profiteering scheme. Rena asserted that the search for the tapes ultimately led to the murders of the two innocent girls. Rena further alleged that several law enforcement officers knew the identity of the killer but chose to cover it up by destroying evidence. They also allegedly threatened her to keep her from speaking out. She specifically named 3 police officers, Gary Butch Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, as harassing and threatening her. Rena further accused then-police Chief Tony Spivey, who led the initial investigation, of being involved in the cover-up. However, she did not reveal the identity of the specific police officer she believed was responsible for the murders. Noted American journalist and newspaper editor John B. Carroll wrote an article discussing the case. John B. believes that the officer involved thought that Tracy and JB would use the tapes as evidence in a trial scheduled for August 2, 1999, just 48 hours after they were killed. However, John B. also claims that Rena was severely beaten with a baseball bat after speaking out, which prevented her from naming the real killer. The officers Rena accused all denied any involvement in the murders of JB and Tracy. Without any physical evidence, none of them were ever officially named as suspects in the case. Regardless, the allegations exploded on numerous true crime websites and social media, leading to a defamation lawsuit. On January 29, 2016, Keith Coffin, Rex Tipton, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary Butch Whittington, all Ozark, Alabama police officers, filed a defamation of character lawsuit against Rena Crum, John B. Carroll, and Dean Matthews. That case was dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum was convicted of molesting JB's sister and was given a suspended sentence and a $250 fine. Over the years, police investigated multiple theories, interviewed hundreds of people, and took DNA samples from several suspects, but to no avail. It took 20 years and the advancement of new DNA technology before police were able to make an arrest. In March 2019, police sent DNA found on JB's body in clothing to Virginia-based Parabon Nano Laboratories, which specializes in DNA. Using a public genealogical database to analyze the suspect's DNA and match it to genetic information led police to a breakthrough in the case. The new evidence linked DNA found at the crime scene to a suspect named Coley McCraney, a man in his 40s. At the time, Coley was not a suspect in the 1999 murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hollett, but the discovery changed everything. Coley, an Alabama native, had led a relatively normal life before his DNA linked him to the crimes. Born in Alabama, Coley attended and graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992, where he was an accomplished athlete and served as president of the school's library club. After completing high school, he enlisted in the United States Air Force and served from 1993 to 1997. Coley's personal life involved several marriages. He married his first wife in 1992 but separated 2 years later and eventually divorced. During this time, his ex-wife accused him of assault and filed a complaint with the Air Force. After the divorce, Coley remarried in 2001 and started a family with his second wife. With the exception of a child support issue in 1998, Coley has no prior criminal record or criminal history. Coley spent 20 years as a truck driver for various companies in Alabama. In addition to his trucking career, he recently co-founded a church and served as a bishop. At the time of the murders, Coley was 26 years old and lived on Lisenby Drive in Ozark, about a mile from where J.B. and Tracy's bodies were discovered in 1999. 20 years after the murders, Coley was arrested on March 19, 2019, following a traffic stop in Daleville, Alabama. During an interview with police, Coley claimed that he did not know JB and Tracy. Police did not provide any information about his possible motive. Coley's arrest took the Ozark community by surprise, especially Police Chief Marlon Walker, who attended school with him. Rena Crum, 53, who previously accused the Ozark Police Department of covering up the killings, withdrew her charges at a hearing in August 2022. Coley McCraney, 49, is facing 5 counts of attempted murder for the shooting deaths of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett and is being held without bail in the Dale County Jail ahead of his trial, which is scheduled for April 17, 2023. At trial, Coley admitted that he knew J.B. He had a conversation with J.B. several weeks before the killings in which she introduced herself as Jennifer at the Wiregrass Commons Mall. He testified that on the day of the killings, he and J.B. had consensual sex in his truck. He said he never knew that Jennifer was J.B. Beasley. On April 26, 2023, a jury found Coley McCraney guilty on all charges and sentenced him to life in prison without parole. In July 2023, a Dale County District Court judge denied Coley's request for a new trial.